Mr. Chairman, you're live.
Thank you, everybody. This will be the Management Audit Committee meeting for August 20th, 2026.
Oh.
I apologize for not being there in person. I had a heart operation here, so I'm recovering from that. And Vice Chairman Larson's graciously agreed to chair the meeting for the convenience of our witnesses and just to have a more comprehensive meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to the chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Knapp. Whoops. I got to turn my. Man, how do I do? Sorry, everyone. There we go. Okay, I think I'm off. I think we'll go ahead and start the, do you want to start roll call? We'll have roll call first.
This is a roll call for Management Audit Committee, August 20th. Senator Ide.
Here.
Senator McEwen.
Here.
Senator Olson. Here. Senator Rothfuss.
Here.
Representative Lean.
Here.
Representative Locke. Representative Williams.
Here.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Here.
And Chairman Knapp.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're going to go ahead and start with a prayer. Representative Locke will do that.
Father in heaven, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to come together. And Lord, to thank you for all the folks who are going to be here and who are to listen in, and going to all the people of Wyoming out there, maybe listening and supporting this meeting. But Lord, I just pray that this body just guide us as we do our work today, and let it be the work for the will of the people of Wyoming. And let us be within your guidance, Lord. Just guide us as we make our decisions, the words we say, the decisions we make. Let them be guided by you and be in support of the folks of Wyoming. Thank you for all you have done for us and you've done for our state. Christ, let me ask you.
Amen. I think we'll have to pledge allegiance also. So flag's over here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We probably need to discuss decorum and civility during legislative meetings. We can be brief on that. I think we'll just have a general decorum and guidelines. Committee members, speakers, and audience members will conduct themselves in a civil and respectful manner at all times during the legislative meeting. Rules for speakers. Speakers will address all comments and questions to the chair. Speakers will refrain from use of individual names. Comments will be directed to the issue under consideration. Testimony that strays far from the topic is out of order. Speakers will refrain from making comments of a personal nature that reflect upon the character or conduct of a committee member or another speaker. Personal criticism, ridicule, and name calling is forbidden. Speakers will refrain from the use of indecent or obscene language, fighting words, or other language which is disruptive to the orderly discussion at the meetings or at the meeting. Time limits for addressing the committee may be imposed depending on the committee's agenda and number of presenters. Rules for members of the public. Audience members will refrain from distracting side conversations or speaking out when another person is talking. Audience members will refrain from shouting, booing, and other similar unruly behavior that impedes or disrupts the orderly conduct of the meeting. And I think we'll go with that. We'll go to the first item. We need to approve the minutes from the last meeting on June 18th. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to go through those. And I would ask if there's any corrections. If not, I'd ask for a motion to approve the minutes in a second.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second. All right. All those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, say nay. That passed. So we'll go on to the next item, administrative rules, legislative review. And for this topic, I think we'll ask Mr. Petrie to come up and start us off. Mr. Petrie?
Good morning, Vice Chairman Larson, members of the committee. My name is Matt Petrie. I'm the administrator of the Research and Evaluation Division of the Legislative Service Office. Just that we want to provide on this very first agenda item, you don't really have anything in your packet specific to refer to. But as we discussed at our June meeting, the legislative review of administrative rules, of course, the scope of it was expanded to some degree effective July 1st. We, of course, have had legal review of administrative rules for decades. But this was legislation that was passed in the 2025 session with an attempt to modify that legislation or that session law in the 2026 budget session. What it does is it gives the legislature the ability to essentially more fully consider rules that pass a certain threshold. Those rules are deemed major rules. As it stands now, they're rules that could have an administrative impact of $1 million or more annually, or that would potentially produce significant adverse impacts. And so just as background, I know that that's probably redundant. We've been talking about this for a year and a half or so, but really what I wanted to do is just give you an update today on the development of that process, that program, and its implementation now that we're about a month and a half into it. So I'm really just going to read you some highlights, some bullet points that I put together to give you an idea of where we're at. Our initial interpretation of Senate File 127, this was the law that was passed in the 2025 general session that called for this program. Our initial interpretation indicated that any final rule adopted on or after July 1st was subject to screening and possible designation as a major rule. This interpretation led to identification of 55 proposed rules that had been noticed through the Secretary of State's office, but had yet to be adopted as final rules by July 1st. Of these 55 rules, 17 of them were flagged as warranting screening and potential major rules consideration. In collaboration with the governor's office, it was agreed that only those proposed rules that were noticed on or after July 1st would be subject to screening and possible designation as major rules. So it restricted the pool out of the gate, if you will, of rules that were subject to this major rules consideration. This clarification represents a one-time reprieve for executive branch agencies, effectively exempting most of the proposed rules that were noticed in the months of April, May, and June 2026. Again, one time, pretty much every rule that is noticed through the Secretary of State's office beginning July 1st will be fully subject to major rules consideration. So that's gives you a little bit of a baseline. The primary takeaway from this one-time exemption that was afforded to agencies was that it also afforded LSO an opportunity to accurately estimate the volume of proposed rules following a legislative session. Not only would this volume of proposed rules be subject to screening and possible designation as major rules, but it would also likely be significantly higher following a general session than it was obviously following a budget session. This projected volume would increase significantly with any reductions in the current major rules threshold of $1 million annually. Since July 1st, we have had 7 proposed rules that have been noticed through the Secretary of State's office. All 7 of these rules have undergone initial intake review, and every regular rule received after June 30th, that will be true for them as well. 5 of those 7 initial reviews have led to requests that agencies complete major rule screening tools. Keep in mind that screening tools are really just that. They are a tool that we've developed for agencies to consider different aspects of their rules in terms of primarily costs, but also benefits. They consider those. We go through the screening tool as well, pretty much look at them side by side and then decide whether we feel like they've passed that threshold and they should be deemed, or we would ask the Management Council to consider them as major rules. So 5 of those 7 led to use of this screening tool. 1 of those 5 has already been designated by the Management Council as a major rule. So we will be asking the agency that promulgated those rules, once they are formally adopted, we will be asking them to take a deeper dive and going beyond that screening tool and completing the survey document that we have that asks much more specific targeted questions. Let's see, we've got 3 more possible designations that we're currently working on, but our indication is that they may be major rules. We would again approach the Management Council through the consent list process to have them make that designation officially, which is the same process that they use for legal review of administrative rules. The consent list goes to the Management Council. They're the ones that actually make that designation. The last of the 5 that I just mentioned was not advanced beyond screening. It really was pretty clear to us and to the agency that it did not surpass. It didn't even come close to that $1 million threshold. Despite the additional rules justification required of agencies, those agencies' LSO approach to date for completion of the screening tool have been very complimentary of our process and the clarity of the instructions provided in the RIA process document and the RIA guide. So I'd just like to say thank you to my staff in the research division, Corey McAuliffe, who's here, as well as Jesse Schaefer, Pierre Chenet. They all had a hand in development of these rules over the last really 15 months. You may recall that in the original legislation, there was not only an appropriation for staffing, but also an appropriation for a predictive analytics software package. We, as of August 1st, we are now fully staffed. We just hired our second regulatory impact analyst. His name is Oliver Watson, and he will be working alongside Corey McAuliffe as our 2 regulatory impact analysts. So again, Oliver started with us just the beginning of this month. We also fully negotiated an agreement with basically a predictive analytics software company called Regional Economic Models Incorporated, or REMI. You'll probably hear us refer to them as that. And again, predictive analytics software is effective September 1st. We just met with them yesterday. We'll start having implementation meetings with them the second week of September, and they will come visit us for 2 days worth of face-to-face training, September, if I remember correctly, 22nd and 23rd. This is the exact same package used by both the Economic Analysis Division of the Department of Administration and Information. They've used it extensively to do modeling of impacts of revenue increases or tax increases, those types of things. And it is also used by the University of Wyoming's Center for Business and Economic Analysis. Honestly, our package has a little bit more functionality than the ones even used by A&I, and I believe by the University of Wyoming as well. Those are statewide models, so they look at impacts from a statewide perspective. Ours will actually drill down to the county level. So we're excited about that. I think that the program has really gotten off on the right foot. We've gotten positive feedback from the agencies that have been approached about working a little bit more on their administrative rules in terms of justification. So I think we're in a good place and just working very steadily. Thank you. I'll stand for any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Petrie. Are there any questions? Any online? All right. We'll go forward with Mr. Anderson on the bill draft consideration, 27 LSO 113.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. You'll recall at the last meeting, we went over the bill from last year, 2026 bill that this committee sponsored. And this bill is very similar to that. It was requested to be brought back to this meeting with just a couple of changes. And then you'll see a couple of staff comments in here. I'll let Mr. Petrie address some of those as those came from his division, as they've been the ones, of course, taking the lead on this process. But just very quickly going through the bill. First, on page 2, it adds a new subparagraph M. This is the notice when the agency goes to adopt a rule. It requires that notice to include that if the rules are major rules as defined in statute, a statement that the rules are major rules, a statement of the need for the major rule, and any additional information necessary for the regulatory analysis. And I don't know if you want to do the staff comment now or wait till the end. Okay, we'll come back to that staff comment, Mr. Chairman. So then that change then continuing bottom of page 3, this is the Secretary of State. Just requiring the Secretary of State on top of page 4 to adopt rules necessary to ensure that state agencies provide the information necessary for the regulatory analysis as required in that new subparagraph M. Then midway on page 4, this is the definition of major rule. And in the bill last year, it excluded emergency rules, and then also essentially excluded management council from the being involved in determining what is or is not a major rule. This new language here now says a major rule means a rule other than an emergency rule or a rule that is required to be promulgated to comply with federal statute or federal regulation, unless that rule is designated as a major rule by management council. That will result or is likely to result in one or more of the following. You'll see some alternative language there in the staff comment if you want to make it clear that it is still required for management council to designate what is or is not a major rule. And again, I think we'll come back to that staff comment, but there's some language there that might clarify how management council is involved in that designation. And then middle of page 5, then if it is a major rule, if it has an annual impact on the economy of Wyoming that will result in direct or indirect costs of not less than $500,000. That's changed from 1 million. And then final staff comment there, just we included the second factor in what could be an emergency rule, or excuse me, a major rule, which is significant adverse effects on competition, employment, investment, productivity, or innovation in the state, including significant adverse effects on individual industries or regions within Wyoming. And as we've discussed several times, it's just, I think that language, there's just not a lot of measurable benchmarks that for an agency to determine when that might be met. So that's the bill, Mr. Chairman. I'd take any questions or turn it over to Mr. Petrie if he has.
Are there any questions for Mr. Anderson? No, no. Oh, we have one online. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Anderson, during the last meeting, we talked about whether or not an agency can self-identify a major rule determination. Is there any need for language in the bill that reflects that, or from your perspective, does this cover it?
Mr. Anderson?
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Rodriguez Williams, yeah, so I think the new language at the bottom of page 2 is that language that would kind of at least make the agency take an initial effort into deciding if they think it's a major rule and indicating that when they promulgate the rules. And that's actually probably a good transition to the staff comment and Mr. Petrie, if that works, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up? No. Any other questions? Oh, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
may, I
Mr.
will
Petrie.
step through the various staff comments in this draft bill. The first one really does address Representative Rodriguez Williams' question that she just posed. And I think that, again, this is one of those things that we've learned through further development of the processes and the program itself. Of course, this language was in the original statute, Senate File 127, Senate File 63 that was considered last year, which would have required agencies when they submitted their rules to the Secretary of State's office to attempt to self-identify whether their rules were in fact major rules. We worked with the Secretary of State's office. That bill, of course, did not pass introduction, and so that language was not considered by the full legislature. We approached the Secretary of State's office to ask if they would voluntarily change their form. They politely indicated that they were not interested in doing so, and I understand that and I respect that. But as we've worked more fully to implement the program, what we've found is potential 2 problems with asking agencies to self-identify. One of the problems is that we don't think that in some cases agencies may have viewed their rules through the perspective that we have in determining whether a rule is a major rule or not. I mean, they've obviously given a lot of thought to the rules and what's needed to implement statute, but they may not have thought through all of the costs and benefits. And so asking them to self-identify at the very front end of the process is really asking them to make a best guess. And then the other thing that we've found in implementation of the process is that in guessing whether their rules may be a major rule, they may simply indicate that they feel that it's not because they haven't run through all of the potential costs of those administrative rules on a statewide basis. And so what it does is it kind of immediately puts the Legislative Service Office and its research division staff at odds with the agency because the agency self-identifies as their rules not being major rules. But then we do our own analysis, and if we feel like they are, then we approach the agency. And so they've said no, we've said yes, and then we're basically already in some form of dispute. I just, in implementation of the process, we just don't see much value in asking agencies to self-identify on the front end. We feel like it's better for them if we feel that their rules may be major rules to go through that screening tool and have a much better understanding of it. So we don't feel real strongly about including that language requiring agencies to self-identify on the front end. If you'd like, Mr. Vice Chairman, I can pause there if there are questions related to that. Otherwise, I can move on to the next staff comment.
Yeah, it looks like there's a question. Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And please help me with, is there a timing issue? they self-identify, LSO has the time to do their own analysis. Is there any significant timing issue between those two decisions that would make it worth them self-identifying initially and then making adjustments later? I'm just kind of curious what that looks like.
Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Representative Locke, not really, no. And the reason why is that as soon as an agency basically submits its rules, they provide notice to the Secretary of State's office. We're notified immediately. So we can take those rules as they're submitted, and we can, if it appears that they could be a major rule, then we start working on our screening tool immediately. We also send that exact same screening to them immediately and ask them to return it in, I believe it's about a 10-day window. The agencies that we've worked with have been great, very compliant there. They're not shy about asking questions. We're not shy about asking questions of them. So I think the process works well. You know, the one thing that we're trying to impress upon agencies, and this is going to take some time because it's a change in the way that they promulgate rules, is that we want them to start thinking about that screening tool while they're writing their rules before they even submit them to the Secretary of State's office. Because the screening tool is really a checklist. And what it is it's not necessarily a specific set of questions. It's more bullet points. You know, did you think about this when you were writing your rules? Did you think about the cost to stakeholders, constituents, businesses, you know, regional economics, those kinds of things? And so, you know, I think we will get there to the point where the addition of this kind of language in the statute would be unnecessary, because agencies, if they feel like they're promulgating relatively significant rules, they will try to get ahead of the process, and they will start working through that screening tool as they're writing their rules. And then they'll be prepared for our questions as soon as they provide their notice of intent.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Petrie. Appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? Don't see any online. I guess we'll go forward.
Okay, thank you. One of the other changes that was in Senate File 63, again, the bill that failed introduction last year, would have potentially removed the management council from the designation process of major rules. And so really and in doing so, the ultimate decision on whether rules should be designated as major rules would have been made at the staff level at LSO, essentially in my division. We wanted these rules, we wanted legislative review of rules, major rules, from a cost-benefit analysis to look as similar as the legal review of administrative rules looks now. That is a process that's incredibly well established, I think, very well accepted. And so what we do, and we've found great value in it, even just in the month and a half that we've been operating in this program and under these processes. What it does is we, as they do with legal review of administrative rules, we send management council a list that says, you know, we think that these may be major rules, but we want you to look at them as well. And then you have the ultimate say in whether they're designated as major rules or not. They have 10 days to object. If anyone on management council objects to a rule being designated as a major rule, then it's we don't move forward. Now, management council still has the ability to change its mind and pull those rules back and say, you know, on second thought, we think these are major rules. But what it does is it gives management council the ability to make that final call, just as they do with legal review of administrative rules. And again, we've found that that is very helpful. And I think that it gives credence to the process, quite frankly, because this is legislative review of administrative rules. It's not legislative service office review of administrative rules. I mean, we're the ones at the nuts and bolts level. We're the ones doing the work in terms of the analysis, but in terms of making that final designation, we feel like it's important that management council remain involved in that process, and they're the ones making the final call. Again, Vice Chairman, I'll stand for questions on that staff comment if you'd like.
Any questions on that staff comment? Don't see any. Please move forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you. This is on page 4 of the draft bill. We talked about the very first portion of that staff comment about the continuation of the management council's involvement in the process. You'll recall as well, in all the meetings we've had on these rules since they were first passed in 2025, part of the definition of major rules includes emergency rules, and it also includes federal rules. And we talked about this at some length at the June meeting, and I think we discussed what amounted to a compromise. Emergency rules, I think at the June meeting and in the legislation that was proposed during the 2026 session, emergency rules, including them in the definition of major rules, is problematic in several aspects. Emergency rules typically, agencies will have to do them. If you have a piece of legislation that passes, say, early, mid-March, most of those rules have to be implemented by July 1st of that year. Agencies will begin promulgating their rules at that point, but their regular rules will not be in place by that July 1 deadline. It's just the process itself and the steps that are involved take an absolute minimum of 130 days. So you have an agency that's required to implement a statute, but they cannot get their regular rules in place in time to meet that July 1st deadline for implementation. And so they implement regular rules, or excuse me, emergency rules. Emergency rules are almost always a mirror image of regular rules. It's just that the agency needs them to start doing what they need to do on July 1st, while the regular rules go through the public comment period. And go through basically scrutiny through the Secretary of State's office, LSO, in terms of a legal review. So emergency rules, really to include them in the definition of major rules is quite frankly redundant. The other problem that it poses is that emergency rules are only good for 120 days. Ironically, getting regular rules through the process takes an absolute minimum of 130 days. So agencies will promulgate emergency rules, and then they will have to do an extension of their emergency rules. And then at some point after that, their regular rules will take effect. So by leaving emergency rules in the definition of major rules, we would essentially be requiring the Research and Evaluation Division staff as well as the Management Council to consider the same set of rules 3 times. So it's really, it's a duplicative type of impact, not only to the staff, but potentially to the agencies as well, and also to Management Council. So, and I think that there was, it appeared to me that at our meeting in June that there was agreement that emergency rules probably did not belong in the definition of major rules. The other aspect of the definition of major rules is those rules that are promulgated because of changes in federal law. And at our June meeting, we talked about this extensively, and really, you know, what we came to was a lot of times with federal rules, what we have is we have rules where the state of Wyoming has primacy. So the federal government essentially recognizes that when a law is passed at the national level, at the federal level, it can't be a one-size-fits-all. That, you know, there are just inherent differences in the characteristics of different states, whether it's geographic, whether it's population-based. But so what they do is the federal government recognizes that states have those unique aspects to their environment. And so they give states the ability to tailor their rules as long as they continue to recognize the federal authority and the federal statute. And so in some respects, the federal government, when primacy is involved, the federal government has already recognized that the state has promulgated its rules in a way that recognize the federal authority at the statutory level. But at the implementation level, it takes into consideration those unique aspects of the state. The other aspect, two other aspects of rules that are driven by changes in federal laws that in some cases, those rules have to be implemented very quickly. And the example that we've used in the past is changes to the drug schedule. So if the federal government adds a drug to one of its schedules in terms of an illicit drug, a narcotic, those need to be added to that drug schedule very quickly, typically in 30 days. And you simply can't do it with this process. This process takes an absolute minimum of 50 days after a rule is formally adopted. And so and it's typically the Attorney General's office that's impacted by those rules. So that's another example of why we would not want to have a blanket policy indicating that all rules driven by changes in federal law should have to go through this process. The last one, quite frankly, is just strictly funding. The federal government, of course, when it provides grant funding to a state, it requires that the state promulgate those rules. If the state does not promulgate those rules to implement that, they stand to lose funding. And of course, we do have agencies that are heavily reliant on federal funding, and most of your larger agencies have a fairly high percentage or proportion of federal funding. So what we talked about previously was some language that wouldn't necessarily completely remove rules promulgated in response to changes in federal law, but that would recognize those unique aspects of rules that are promulgated because of changes in federal law. And again, what it does is it pulls the management council into that process. So that if the management council has the ultimate say on designation of major rules, they can look at those aspects. They can look at primacy. They can look at changes to the drug schedule. They can look at impacts on federal funding. And so what it does is it gives us an ability to not do a blanket exemption of rules driven by changes in federal law, but to look at those where it makes sense for the state to put them through the major rules process, the regulatory impact analysis process, and then those where they've essentially, the agencies have already addressed it through primacy. So that is the other aspect in terms of definitions for major rules, and the two portions of that definition of major rules that we would like you to consider changing now that we've got a better understanding of the process itself, emergency rules and rules driven by federal law.
Senator Ide has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Petrie, thanks for being here. Explain the process of challenging federal primacy. Who starts and stops that process if you question their authority on primacy at the federal level? Where's their enumerated power? And does somebody kind of go through that analysis to push back? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I may defer to Josh if I could, because I think that, again, with primacy, you've got a change in federal law, but the state agency that's charged with implementing that federal law, Wyoming's version of it, they recognize primacy. But in terms of challenging primacy, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer for that question.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yeah, and I don't know that I have a good answer to that either. I think when he's referencing primacy, it's those areas where, you know, the federal government has a process in place, but because of the differences between states, they recognize that the states have primacy in certain areas, and so, and in order to keep that primacy, we have to do certain things to still stay in compliance with the federal laws, but they give the state more ability to to regulate it themselves rather than to have the federal government step in and have uniform laws for all of the states. So I think that's what some of that discussion was about. But yeah, as far as if the state was challenging that, I don't know that we have a set process in place that at least not that I'm aware of.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah. Quick follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So if a red flag pops up on primacy at the federal level, who makes the decision to push forward and push back potentially if they think that it's not, the authority of the federal government to claim primacy? Does that go to the Attorney General's office, or how does that work? Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Hyde, yeah, I believe that would, in that case, I think that would go through the Attorney General's office to kind of challenge whatever federal action they had issue with.
Any other questions? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about primacy. My question is this all about federal funding? If we don't take the federal funds, doesn't the 10th Amendment protect us?
Any comments, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Petrie?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, not sure I'm fully following, but in this case, all this bill is trying to do is just say that if, and mirroring what some other states are, is that if the rule is solely to comply with federal law, that we wouldn't necessarily review it through this major rule review process unless Management Council directs us to. So that's kind of where this bill is going, and either the current language or the alternative language that's in the staff comment.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Why are we discussing primacy? Why are we letting the federal government control us when they shouldn't be? Sorry to be so blunt, but it just amazes me. Are we that after federal funding? Or we're not? Do we want to run our state under the 10th Amendment, or don't we? I guess that's more of a comment than a question. So I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but I don't get it.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. An example that I think clarifies the concern there is, I think, perhaps the Clean Air Act. Implementation of the Clean Air Act, that's a federal law, but the state of Wyoming can choose to implement and accept primacy or declare primacy over it. So there are certain conditions that allow us to do that, where our Department of Environmental Quality can take over much of the Clean Air Act implementation instead of the EPA doing that. So that's to our advantage. We've been federally preempted through the Clean Air Act. We don't have authority over what the Clean Air Act governs, but we're allowed to work through it. When there are changes, we change the rules associated with it within the state of Wyoming. Those rules would potentially lead to millions of dollars of implications. But the reason we're changing those rules is because federal law, federal rule and regulation has changed in such a way that we are required to do that. The idea that we would then review those rules for the implications to the state when we're complying with federal law so that we maintain primacy, doesn't necessarily make sense. At the same time, we are so much better off having primacy over the Clean Air Act than leaving it to the EPA and having to work through the EPA for all of our actions related to oil and gas operations, for example. It's absolutely absurd that we would not accept that primacy. So in that circumstance, it's not about accepting money. It's not about rejecting money. It's about the fact that federal law preempts state law, whether we like it or not. And I know that a lot of times we don't like it. There's a lot of times I don't like it as well, but that is the reality. So we need that primacy. And to do that, we're going to have to adhere. So that's just one example that comes to mind for me through my work on the Minerals Committee of an area where primacy is the best we can possibly do.
Mr. Petrie?
Yes.
Do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. And I think just to clarify, I think that primacy is one of those areas where I think that, again, as Senator Rothfuss indicated, it gives the state the ability to tailor rules to fit implementation of federal law, to best fit Wyoming. There's not always a direct connection between high levels of federal funding and primacy. They can stand alone. Obviously, in some cases, you're going to have programs that are very heavily funded by the federal government, but primacy may not even come into the picture with those. So really, I think that there are two potentially separate considerations, if you will, or concerns when we're dealing with rules that are driven by changes in federal law.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. So it's not about money, and it's really not about primacy. My question is, why would we as a state put up with this garbage? Let the federal government run us? I don't know. I'm lost. And we keep saying it's not about money, but then we talk about the millions and millions of dollars we get. Who's running this state, us or the federal government? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments?
Mr. Vice Chairman, just one last comment. I think that one important distinction is that the Management Council, as the body that ultimately makes the decision to designate a rule as a major rule, can certainly consider any rule that's driven by changes in federal law. They have that discretion to do so. What this does is it gives the Management Council the ability to potentially exempt some rules promulgated by an agency that are driven by changes in federal law. So the decision still remains with the Management Council. It's just not a blanket requirement that every rule that's promulgated as a result of a change in federal law go through the major rule process.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for presenting this today. My question, could you kind of break this down for me? I'm going to use the Rock Springs RMP as an example. Could the Management Council have exempted all the laws around the Rock Springs RMP to allow the federal government to maintain no use of
Yes,
that?
ma'am. Sorry.
Mr. Petrie? You have a comment?
Mr. Vice Chairman, Representative Lane, I may not be as familiar with the situation as I should be to answer that question intelligently, but I think that, again, what the Management Council, the authority that it would retain would be whatever state agency is required to implement those changes in federal law. The Management Council would retain the ability, as that agency is promulgating the rules to implement those changes in federal law, the Management Council would retain the ability to either subject those to the major rules process, the regulatory impact analysis process, or not. But they would retain that authority to make that decision, whether to designate or not designate.
Thank you.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just if I
Yes.
can add on one little thing there is that, and this is just the major rule issue. So those rules would still simultaneously be going through the legal review as well for management council. So this is separate from that existing legal review of the rules and is just for this major impact.
Senator Ride.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for your information on this. Yeah, I always see that over the years. We always defer to federal law, it seems like, and we act like we're the servant and not the master, which should be the other way around. We're the master and they're the servant. Does the agency ever consider nullification at all, or turn it over to the AG's office as far as looking at something that the federal government claims primacy on? And, they look at it and it's like, well, where's their enumerated power? Can we just, like, for instance, I'm glad Representative Lean brought up the Rock Springs RMP, and that's just one small example. I think we have 50 lawsuits with the federal government on our natural resources. So just real short, and we're kind of carrying on here, but that's why I brought the question up mainly. Does anybody ever look at saying, hey, they're wrong on this, we can nullify this? Like Thomas Jefferson said, nullification is something that the states have the power to do if they realize there's something that's really maybe an unconstitutional law that are made all the time. Thank you.
Any comments, Mr. Anderson?
I think there's a whole body of case law, on federal preemption, how the executive branch does that if there's something handed down to them from the federal government. I think we might need to bring them in, the agencies or the attorney general in on what their process is. But I think it would start at that side of the government.
Any other questions? All right, I don't see any. I think we'll go to, I do want to recognize Senator Krago's here and want to welcome you. Thank you. We'll go to public comment now. I do know we have a governor's office online. Are they prepared, and can we let them in?
Yep, I am promoting Betsy Anderson to a panelist right now. She should show up on the screen here in a moment.
Okay, we'll go to Betsy Anderson in the governor's office.
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Members, Mr. Vice Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Betsy Anderson, and I am Governor Gordon's Deputy Chief of Staff and General Counsel. Good morning. I have some comments, but I think I can start with that. I really support Mr. Petrie's comments and the staff comments that are in the draft bill. And so that probably makes my comments easier. I mainly want to speak to the self-identification language at the bottom of page 2, and then also the definition of major rule that's on page 4 and 5. Just to maybe add a little bit more color from the executive branch side with regards to the proposed section 16.3.103F on the bottom of page 2. This would require an agency to self-identify, as you call it, a rule is a major rule. And this is at the time they are filing with the rules with the Secretary of State for public comment. So as Mr. Petrie said, it's very early on in the process. And this is well before Management Council makes a determination if the rule is a major rule. So that seems to be actually a little bit confusing. And I do believe this is a significant burden on the agencies. They're not economists. I guess the economic division is filled with economists, but for the most part, these people are not economists. And I think it'd be very difficult for them to make that type of assessment. And just to, it's going to be particularly difficult for the very small agencies. And I think of our licensing boards. These licensing boards, a lot of the staff are that profession. They're nurses, they're architects, they're speech therapists. They're not economists. And so when you look at the description and things like opportunity cost, that is part of the analysis to determine if something's a major rule, I think that would be really difficult. And then I also worry, what does it mean if they fail to name something a major rule and then it actually does have an impact larger than whatever the dollar amount is? I hate to put that type of responsibility on them when, again, that is not any area that they have any expertise on by far. And of course, LSO was given 2 positions to handle this, and I think they've hired people that are properly experienced and trained to do this type of analysis. And so I really think it'd be best if LSO and the Management Council is the one to make those those determinations. Again, the agencies provide information, and that is in the law, and that hopefully the agencies are doing that. Mr. Peachtree and Mr. McAuliffe have been great about including us and Secretary of State's office, AG's office on their thoughts and their process, and that's been great. And be great about trying to keep our cabinet up to date on their plans. So that is my comment on that part. And then my comment on the major rules probably does tie back. And we do prefer the definition that is in the staff comment. And this is where it does retain the ability that the Management Council makes a determination. Part of my concern with the other language is that it really doesn't indicate anybody has the ultimate decision-making authority. It just says a major rule is a major rule if it meets this criteria, but it doesn't really say who makes the determination it meets that criteria. So I kind of feel like that could lead to some confusion. So we agree with that staff comment there. And then to exempting emergency rules and rules required by federal law, we support those changes. Obviously, we believe that the dollar amount should remain at $1 million. In fact, we think it should be higher, but that is obviously your decision. I wanted to bring up one point, and I have brought this up to LSO. It is a concern we see with this process. I assume the regulatory impact analysis is to analyze the impact of the rule and not the statute that authorizes the rule. And I think it has to provide for the impact of the rule, not the statute, because this new process, this law in 2025 that was passed, provides legislators with additional ability to put forward an order to the legislature to rescind a rule. And so this is not about the statute, this is about the rule. And I think in a lot of instances, it's going to be really difficult to distinguish the impact of the rule from that of the statute. And an example I'm going to give you is, let's say law is passed and it requires some type of new permit for some type of waste disposal, just as an example. And then the agency is going to pass rules outlining the application process required, the documentation, the timing, et cetera, for that permit. They'll have to implement that law. So how are you going to differentiate the impact of the rule as opposed to the impact of a new permit? And obviously a new permit is going to have an economic impact. It in and of itself is going to cost time, it's going to cost money, it has an impact. And if the rule is merely giving the details of that cost and time, how can you attribute some part to the rule and some part to the statute? And I go back, the purpose of this is that it broadens the authority of individual legislators to bring forward an order for a rescission of a rule. If you didn't like the statute, you'd have to put forth a bill to amend the statute. And so that's just something that, and I've mentioned this to LSO staff, and I think they've got to figure out how to make that happen, but that's just a concern I have. And then finally, I think we all know that the governor did veto this legislation in 2025. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention certainly his overall concerns, being first the uncertainty this legislation causes for constituents who must rely on rules, and the increased bureaucracy on a process that already involves substantial and significant review. Outside of the major rule process, a rule can go through up to 9 different reviews, including from both executive and legislative branch entities. So I think the question becomes at what point is review of these rules enough? So, and with that, I am happy to stand for any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Anderson? I see Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Anderson, thank you for joining us today and for your testimony. We're talking about rules. Talk to me a little bit about codes. So Wyoming often adopts, I can see, come July 1 of this year, we adopted the National Electric Code. And over the past couple of years, we've adopted several other international fire codes, building codes, et cetera, that really, have an impact on our communities and small business owners, specifically our contractors and so forth. Talk to me about the process that undergoes when it comes to approval through your office.
Ms. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Rodriguez-Williams, I have to say I'm not familiar with the adoption of codes. So I would have to look into that and get back to you with an answer on that. I would say if you've adopted it by statute, then that would require amending the statute. So if you're saying that a rule adopts an exterior code, then that would be something that would go through this process. But I'm not familiar with that, and so I'd really have to look into it and get back to you with an answer.
Do you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I'm just curious. I know that it's something that bypasses the legislative branch of government, and so I'm curious what that looks like and how that plays into what we're trying to accomplish through this legislation. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Anderson. I heard you say that you're not in favor of this legislation, but I would like to ask, what suggestions would you have then that would oversee the rulemaking process when they do go against law?
Ms. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lane, if a rule is in violation of a statute, it is in and of itself null and void, because a rule cannot do anything that conflicts with the laws passed by the legislature. And I do think that's why we have reviews on top of reviews on top of reviews, is at some point you would hopefully somebody say, no, wait, you've gone beyond what the statute allows. I will say, one of those reviews is the Attorney General's office, who represents that this rule is within statutory authority. And then the governor, when he is signing it representing that this is within statutory authority. So that is, we do our best to make sure that if something's not in conflict with the law. But people have different interpretations of the law. And so obviously there would come times when people disagree, a law gets to, and I can tell you there's a time when laws get to us, so where this happens more often is part of the process, and one of the reviews is before a rule is put out for public comment, it is required that the governor's office review it then, way before, at the very early part of the process. And that's done by governor's office staff, it's done by me and the special counsel here in the office. And I can tell you, we look at rules and we say, wait, no, we disagree. This goes too far. You have to go back. We've actually done that twice in probably the last 2 months, and that we disagreed Department of Health wanted to say, we're taking these fees out, it'll just be posted at our office. I looked at it, I said, no, the law says that the fees are to be included in the statute. I don't see how you make that interpretation. And they're not going to put those rules forward. But at the end of the day, if they get all the way through the process and they are a rule and somebody disagrees with that, that's where you have to go to the court system and say, I disagree with this rule. But I think, and to say I disagree with this rule because I believe it exceeds statutory authority or it conflicts with the law. And that's how the process works. But I think when you get to that point, you're probably talking about a difference of interpretation and not a direct or clear conflict.
Follow up?
No, thank you.
No. Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Henderson. I
Thank
don't
you.
see any others. Is there any public comments in the audience here? Don't see any. Any others online dealing with this?
Nobody online is currently indicating by putting a hand up that they are interested in testifying on this topic.
Thank you. All right, we'll go to what's the committee's directives? Do you want to just leave the bill where it's at? Representative Lean.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, would you entertain a motion to move this bill so that it could be sponsored by Management Audit Committee?
I think that's a good suggestion. Is there a second? Second. We have a second, Representative Locke. So now we're open for discussion and we can, I think, move through the bill and
I
see if
apologize, Mr. Chairman. I believe Representative Sherwood has a hand up.
Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman, yes, I think we're ready to work the bill. If that is the case,
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to remove the requirement of additional notice and on page 2, the language that asks or suggests the agency should self-identify. I think we should remove that language in accordance with the staff comment.
Can you be specific on page 2? Are you talking about line 20 through 22 and then continuing on page 3?
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, there's been a suggestion for an amendment to remove on page 2, line 20 through 22, and then page 3, line 1 through 2. And we have a second. Senator Rothfuss. Is there, I think we'll just deal with that right now. And is there any discussion? Any discussion? No comments. Okay, we'll just go to voting. I think we're just going to do a voice vote. And then if I can't determine, I'll ask for hands. So all those in favor of this amendment to delete lines 20 through 22 on page 2 and then lines 1 and 2 through page 3 on page 3, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. I'm not sure if I heard all the no's, but I guess we're going to have to raise hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. I see 3. All those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 no's, so that is failed. Shall we move on? Is there more amendments? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would move the alternative language provided by staff in the second staff comment. That language is shown on page 5 at the top that allows for a major rule, the flexibility for management council to make a decision as it relates to emergency rules.
We have an
Second.
amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
There's this second, Representative Sherwood. So just so everybody understands, I think that deletes line 8 through 14 on page 4 and inserts line 7 through 14 on page 5. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Senator Rothman.
just as a reminder, what that does is it provides the flexibility that you could have an emergency rule that was significant enough that you would want it to be designated by management council and considered early. If we don't accept this amendment, then there's effectively no way to work through one of those circumstances. So this allows management council to sort of override that default policy, which may be appropriate at some point. Hopefully not. Hopefully you don't need it, but it's always good to have the capacity for the legislature to weigh in a circumstance that might be exceptional.
Any other discussion? All right, we're going to vote on this. I think we're just going to start with raising hands. All those in favor of this amendment, raise your hand. All those opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like it's 6 to 5. Fails 6 to 5. Any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Just thinking around the regulatory burden that our dollar threshold creates on page 5, line 21, and suggesting that we stay at that $1 million threshold.
There's an amendment to leave that at 1 million and take out the 500,000. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second, Senator Rothfuss. Any discussion? Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I stand opposed to this motion as our Wyoming economy is it's in need of some bolstering. And so any amount of impact to our economy at this point will need to be reviewed to make sure that we're making sure that we're doing the best for the will of the people.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we'll start, we'll just go, we'll vote on this by raising hands. All those that would like to change on line 21, page 5, leave in 1 million and delete 500,000, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. I see 3. Those opposed, raise your hand. 6, 7. I see 7 opposed. So that remains. Any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Senator Hyde.
Yeah, this maybe, I don't know if there's an amendment in this, but I want a little more explanation, maybe members of the committee on, this on page 5, line 7, major rule shall not include any emergency rule or rule that is required to be promulgated to comply with federal statute or federal regulation. Somebody help me out there. Does that help us or hurt us on this particular language?
Any comments on that? Anyone?
For more freedom for the state.
Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So as a reminder, that's in the staff comments. So that language, it was what I offered as an amendment. The language that's in the bill is the more restrictive amendment or language that's on page 4. The more restrictive language says that under no circumstance will we worry about any federal statutes or federal regulations. Whereas that alternative language allowed us the opportunity to worry about it if we chose to, but we have rejected that. So at this point in time, to the good senator's question, there are no circumstances under which we would consider any changes to federal law or federal rules and regulations changes that trigger a rule change in the state of Wyoming. So we've already taken care of that. We voted on it once in the day. And at this point, then we have full deference to the federal government according to how this is drafted by the vote a moment ago.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. I guess I can comment. I don't read it that way up there on what's in current language. I read it a little different, and maybe we can get staff comment, Mr. Anderson or Mr. Petrie. The way I read it is the major rule means a rule other than an emergency rule or a rule that is required to be promulgated to comply with federal statute or federal regulation. Unless, I think the word unless gives the ability to the management council to do those. But maybe staff can comment.
Mr. Chairman, yes, so I think the language that's in the bill, I think the intent there was to give management council the ability to designate those emergency rules or federal rules as major rules. The language in the staff comment, I think, was to more clarify management council's involvement in the overall process. So, you know, the bill last year kind of removed management council from the designation process. This bill, in the language that's on page 4, brought them in just for the designation of those emergency rules or major rules. And then the alternative language in the staff comment was to kind of clarify their involvement in the overall process. So that was the intent with how those were drafted. And if there's confusion, we can certainly try to clear that up, but that was the intent.
Any other comments, Senator Ride?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm still a little bit confused on what's more restrictive and what's less restrictive as far as follow-up to Senator Rothfuss's comments on there. So I guess I can't really do anything with this because I don't fully understand, you know, if this language is more restrictive to the state and more, you know, deference to the federal government or not. If somebody can give me a yes or no answer on that, it might help. Thank you.
Mr. Anderson, do you have a comment on that?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the language in the bill, again, I think for federal rules promulgated in response to federal law, it would exclude them from a major rule unless designated by management council as a major rule. And that's for both the language in the bill and the language in the staff comment. Without either of those changes, then we wouldn't distinguish between those types of rules and other rules in designation of whether or not they're major rules. So, hope that clarifies.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I was getting at my read, and I don't know that this is coming through, and perhaps I'm mistaken on it, is that the current language in the bill would not allow management council to override an emergency rule. And the updated language in the alternative language would allow management council, I shouldn't say override, to review or determine as a major rule an emergency rule under these circumstances. And I thought that was captured as a key difference in the language. And that gets to the restrictive aspect that I was discussing. And am I mistaken that that's my read, and I thought that was what was said?
Mr. Anderson.
So, Mr. Chairman, so yeah, I think in the bill, I think it could be read that the unless language only applies to the federal rules and not emergency rules. And we could certainly clarify that if that's the intent of the legislature, but I think that unless language would apply to the federal, at least to the federal rules, that it will give the management council the ability to designate them as major rules.
But Mr. Chairman, on that point, but not if it were a federal rule change that was implemented through an emergency rule, my read of the existing language is that the emergency rule implementation of it would not be something that the management council could call a review over. And therefore, you would have that 12-month or period of time or however long it ends up being with that implementation without the possibility of management council oversight for that federal change, Whereas, as I noted earlier, there's clarity in the alternative language that I think makes it absolutely clear. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think that's.
Mr.
Excuse me,
Anderson,
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, yes, yes, I think that's correct.
Okay, so, and that was the concern I was expressing, Mr. Chairman, was that we eliminated that possibility a minute ago. Yeah.
Any other discussion? Any other amendments? Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I move for a reconsideration of Representative or Senator Rothfuss's amendment about the major rule?
I think you can. So are you going to make that amendment to bring that back?
Well, I would move for the reconsideration of his amendment regarding major rule and the staff's comment.
All right, we have a motion to reconsider in a second. Yeah, I'm going to just explain it, I think. I think what we're doing is deleting line 8 through 14 on page 4 and inserting line 7 through 14 on page 5, which was a suggestion from LSO staff. Any discussion? Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Senator Rothfuss, maybe explain that again, just if you don't mind, just one more time. I'm a little slow on the uptake here, and just explain to me how that gives the state more autonomy, so to speak, than it did before. Thank you.
Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the language is currently drafted on page 4, so the current version, the major rule would exempt emergency rules under all circumstances, but it would allow the management council to deem, if they chose to, a federal statute or federal regulation for consideration as a major rule. So it would take that out most of the time, but allow it if they opted to, but not for the emergency rule standpoint. The alternative language would allow management council to consider an emergency rule that may or may not be federally implemented, as well as the federal implementation. So the key is on the emergency rule aspect as to whether or not the management council could designate an emergency rule as a major rule if it chose to. And as we heard in testimony, that can be for about 12 months and has the potential to have a significant effect. So the current language in statute is more restrictive on what the legislature is allowed to do under this act. The proposed language clarifies that the management council would be able to designate an emergency rule as a major rule and provide the same consideration for that. And I'll just note, there was a circumstance, for example, I don't know, it was probably almost 10 years ago now, when the School Facilities Committee objected to an emergency rule and shut that down because it was very significant policy change. And we didn't want to see the emergency rule implemented. So we worked with the school facilities department at the time to not adopt the emergency rule. They have the authority largely to adopt that, but we stepped in because we realized it was a problem and didn't want it to be implemented. So if there's a desire to have the access to this statute so that there'd be the potential to consider major rule changes that do have impact, it does seem logical that you wouldn't want those implemented for 12 months prior to that review taking place. Now, some circumstances you might be okay with it, others you wouldn't. So it seems that from a restrictive standpoint, if this is legislation that is supported and we want this rule in place, you would want management council to be able to say, we do want to look at and expedite the review of this emergency rule prior to it being implemented. And that's where I see it as more empowering to the legislature with the alternative language in the amendment.
Any other discussion? Nobody online. Okay. Everybody's ready to vote. The amendment is to delete, like I said before, line 8 through 14 on page 4 and insert line 7 through 14 on page 5. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed, raise your hand. I'm not sure, but I think we had plenty, and those in favor, I think I had 7. So that amendment passes. Any other discussion? If there's no more discussion, I think we'll, I don't know, do we have to have a motion to move this forward as a management council or a management audit bill, or did you do that? That was the motion. Okay, I think we're ready for a roll call. Please, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for 27 LSO-0113 as amended.
Yes.
Senator Ide,
No.
Senator McEwen,
No.
Senator Olson,
No.
Senator Rothfuss, Representative Lean,
Aye.
Representative Block,
Aye.
Representative Williams,
Aye.
Representative Sherwood,
No.
Vice Chairman Larson,
Aye.
Chairman Knapp.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 5 ayes and
I need to vote.
I apologize. Representative Dockstetter.
Oh.
Or
Aye.
Senator Dockstetter, I apologize.
And what was that, Senator?
Okay, we're all good. Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that is 6 ayes and 5.
I don't know, or no to I.
With Senator Ide being a no to aye, that is 7 ayes and 4 noes.
All right, we'll move that forward as a committee bill. I think we are going to take a break real quick. It's almost 10. We'll be back at 10:10, so 10 minutes. There you go. Ah. special district audit process. And I think we'll go ahead and start with our LSO staff. Mr. Petrie. Whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. You'll recall that during our June meeting, Libby Miles, who is one of our associate research analysts, had put together some information for you on this same topic. During that discussion, the committee asked for information on the fact sheet that you have in your packet, specifically penalties for noncompliance of financial reporting for local governments and surrounding states. And we'll provide a little bit more information on what technically is non-compliance following essentially this presentation. But what I want to do, I don't want to really read the fact sheet to you. I think that when you look at penalties for non-compliance of financial reporting in other states, there are a lot of similarities. Of course, here in the state of Wyoming, as we discussed in the month of June, those entities that are deemed non-compliant, their tax revenue, sales and use tax revenue, can be withheld until they come into compliance. And that's a fairly common theme among surrounding states. And it doesn't only apply, basically to those entities that receive sales and use tax distributions from the Department of Revenue. It can be also districts that receive revenue that's a pass-through, say, from the county to that special district. So it's not limited to just, say, municipalities and counties that benefit from sales and use tax. But the one thing that I want to, that you'll hear me say over and over again as we kind of walk through these different states is the time frame. That was really kind of the underlying theme as I read Ms. Miles' research. And in the state of Wyoming, in terms of filing reports, filing with the Department of Audit, the filing window in most cases is shorter in Wyoming than it is in other states. And I believe that you heard that from the folks that represented the Wyoming Association of Municipalities in the June meeting, is that it's difficult. It can be difficult to meet that 3-month filing deadline. So if their fiscal year ends on June 30th, as the state's does, then typically they only have until September 30th to satisfy that submission deadline. If they don't, they're deemed non-compliant. And you've seen on a monthly basis, the Department of Revenue will share with us those reports of non-compliant entities. And then Lisa Canaday in our office forwards those on to you. And you'll see some correlation between those weekly reports to you and some of the internal reporting that the Department of Audit has that I'll touch on a little bit later. But I'm just going to really touch on some of the unique aspects of some of our surrounding states. Again, recognizing that there are a lot of common things and a lot of similarities. If we start with the state of Colorado, right there in that very first paragraph, you'll see that basically their filing deadline at the end of their fiscal year end is 6 months. And so a little more liberal, if you will, a little more grace period, if you will, for entities to submit their documentation to. In this case, it is submitted to state auditor. If after 9 months of the fiscal year end, an entity has not made their submission to the state auditor, basically the state auditor notifies the county treasurer of the delinquent audit status and authorizes them to prohibit the release of funds generated by the local taxing authority until the audit is filed. So very similar to the state of Wyoming. It can also cause an audit to be made at the expense of the local government. If we move to the state of Idaho, again, if we look at just the period for submission of reports, and these go to the Legislative Services Office in the state of Idaho, there's a 9-month window. So 9 months, within 9 months of the end of the appropriate reporting period. So again, a little more, a longer submission period recognized in the state of Idaho. The one unique aspect for the state of Idaho is in the second paragraph following the title, Idaho. State controller may impose a late fee of up to $500 a day for each day over 30 days a local government is non-compliant. This is one of those areas where I may defer to the Department of Audit, but I do not believe that Wyoming has a late fee similar to that. Either the imposition of a fee or, if one exists, the dollar amount. Another unique aspect about the state of Idaho that Ms. Miles found in her research was the very last paragraph for the state of Idaho. Any local government that is found to be non-compliant is prohibited from including a budget increase in their budget, which would otherwise have been permitted. Additionally, the State Tax Commission must withhold the quarterly distribution of sales tax for any non-compliant entity. So that second sentence, again, is very similar to the state of Wyoming, but the first sentence, prohibited from including a budget increase in their budget. That's a fairly significant penalty, and certainly not something that we see across the board in surrounding states, unique to the state of Idaho. If we look at Kansas, really the only thing I wanted to mention with respect to the state of Kansas was, again, the amount of time that municipalities, counties, special districts have for filing. And this is with the Secretary of Administration in the state of Kansas within 1 year of the filing period. So again, longer than we typically see in Wyoming. Montana, pretty much the same thing, within 6 months of the end of the reporting period. If we jump to page 4 of your report, a couple of unique aspects that the state of Montana has as well. I'll just read them to you. If a local government fails to file a financial report as required, the department will either assess a monthly penalty of 10% of the required filing fee. So Montana does have a filing fee that's imposed upon those entities making submissions, or issue an order to withhold payment of any state financial assistance to the entity. So again, similar to Wyoming, but the fact that they assess a filing fee, and then if there's non-compliance in terms of submission, part of the penalty is a percentage of that filing fee. Filing fee has already been paid, or if they haven't submitted, the filing fee will be paid. But then if it's late, there would be a 10% penalty. 10% of that filing fee would also be assessed as a penalty. Another very unique aspect for the state of Montana is you'll see on page 4, there are 3 bullet items toward the bottom of the page. If an entity does not file the required financial report or fails to resolve significant audit findings by implementing corrective measures within 2 years of the deadlines, statute outlines individuals who may pursue written determination from the department to bring cause of action against the entity for failure to comply with the fiduciary requirements. Those individuals that can pursue written determination from the department include any person who pays property taxes to the entity, any elected officer of any local taxing jurisdiction that collects revenue from or distributes revenue to the entity, or any person residing within the boundaries of the entity who can demonstrate a specific personal or legal and legal interest as distinguished from a general interest and has been or is likely to be specially and injuriously affected by the local government entity's failure to meet the reporting requirements. So again, a unique aspect of Montana law in this area. If we move to South Dakota, of the states that we looked at, surrounding states probably has the least information available with respect to penalties for noncompliance. There's really no dollar amounts specified in terms of penalties. South Dakota statute states that if any required audit report discloses malfeasance, misfeasance, or neglect of duty on the part of an employee or officer, it is the duty of the proper legal officer to institute civil action. That's pretty much the extent of it in the state of South Dakota. Utah, again, within 6 months of the close of the fiscal year, so a longer period of time for entities to file. And then the last thing that I want to mention, and this is specific to the state of Utah, again, a relatively unique aspect for that state. The state auditor is permitted to withhold allocated state funds to pay the cost of the financial report caused by the state auditor if an entity is non-compliant with reporting requirements. So I believe that that means that the state auditor can basically compel production of a financial report, and then it can withhold allocated state funds to pay itself back for that financial report. So those are, again, if you read through the entire report, you'll see a lot of commonalities, very similar threads for the states that we surveyed. But the one, aside from these very unique aspects in some of these states, the one thing that you see time and time again is a longer filing period, a longer submission period for entities in those states, ranging anywhere from 6 months to 12 months. With that, Mr. Vice Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Petrie, did the research come across any nuance or differences in the size of a community? For example, 4,000 or less, 4,000 or more, in sort of the requirement based on size and capacity? Thank you.
Mr. Petrie.
Mr. Vice Chairman, Representative Sherwood, yes, it did. And I believe that the report that we gave during the June meeting outlined those differences. There are certainly differences in Wyoming in terms of what is required of an entity based upon population. And I don't have those in front of me, but we could certainly provide those again. And I don't recall whether that report that was presented in June, I believe that it did. I believe it spelled that out again for those same states. There's essentially an element of scale in terms of what an entity needs to submit for its required reporting, its required financial reporting. Obviously, with those entities that are larger, it's a higher bar. But that was certainly the case for surrounding states.
Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I will go back to my June notes and refresh myself there. Just wanted the committee to keep in mind that there are nuances when it comes to local capacity based on the size of a community. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Petrie? I don't see any. I think we're ready to go forward.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. The next thing that I wanted to explain very briefly, and I'd like to thank the Department of Audit for educating me on this, is, as I mentioned at the beginning of my testimony on the previous agenda item, on a monthly basis, the Department of Revenue will notify us of those entities that are deemed non-compliant and that are having their sales and use tax withheld until they come into compliance. The term compliance, I think, is very important in this discussion, because what that really refers to is, have they met the filing deadline? Not necessarily the content of whatever financial reports they have submitted and compliance with accounting standards within those. Did the audit that was submitted, was it sufficient in terms of meeting accounting standards? So when we talk about compliance, and when you see those reports on a monthly basis that are forwarded to you from our office that originate from the Department of Revenue, it is those entities that had to report by September 30th, that 3-month window, but did not do so. And then on a monthly basis, the Department of Audit determines whether they have satisfied submission of those financial reports or not. The ones that have not yet satisfied it, let's say that it's the end of October, end of November, end of December. If they have not yet satisfied those submission requirements, they are non-compliant. And they're reported as such. Those are the ones that you're notified on a monthly basis. And I had sent out a rather lengthy spreadsheet that shows as of August 1st, those entities that were deemed non-compliant. And you can see it's a color-coded spreadsheet, but in the very far right-hand column, there was a column, the title head or the column heading was, has the entity submitted all required paperwork? And you'll see that most of those entities have a yes. Some of them have no's, and those are the ones that you're being notified of the details on a monthly basis. You'll also see that some have been granted extensions, but keep in mind that as of August 1st, we're months beyond that October 1st submission deadline or that September 30th submission deadline. So a lot of the entities that you see here may have been non-compliant on October 1st, November 1st, December 1st, but they've come into compliance. They've submitted everything that's required of them as of the date of this report, August 1st. But that just gives you an idea of the way that the Department of Audit tracks those submissions and then works with the Department of Revenue to deem some counties and some entities within counties non-compliant. With that, again, I might defer to the folks here from the Department of Audit to provide greater detail if there are other questions, but that's really a kind of a baseline description of what constitutes non-compliance and then what other states do in reference to that type of non-compliance. With that, Vice Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Are there any questions? I would like to refer, and maybe you can just clarify that on page 1 of that document. Like, let's just take an example of the second one on there, the Campbell County Conservation District. Looks like it has a no at the end. And so currently they're not compliant is kind of what that says.
Mr. Vice Chairman, yes, that's correct. As of August 1st, they were non-compliant.
As of August 1st, okay, this year, okay.
Correct.
And these reports should have been given last year by October. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're now ready to go to the bill draft consideration. We'll just go like our agenda shows. And I think Mr. Anderson is maybe going to present that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh Anderson, LSO. This is 27 LSO 115, working draft 0.4. So this draft was requested at our June meeting. The draft request was for a draft that if an entity is non-compliant with their audit findings for 3 consecutive years, that they would have their taxes withheld, similar to the current process for failing to report. So the bill, Mr. Chairman, on page 2 goes into subsection C and adds new language, just saying that if any county, city, town, special district, or entity described in 16.4.125C is audited by the Department of Audit or by a certified public accountant, and the audit contains the same or substantially similar finding of noncompliance for a period of 3 years, that entity shall report to the Director of the Department of Audit not later than 90 days following the date of that third finding of noncompliance. And and report on the action or actions the city, town, or special district or entity has taken to address that finding of noncompliance. Then on page 3 in subsection J, it adds new paragraphs 5 and 6 that mirrors the existing language in paragraphs 2 and 4 for failure to report the expenditures. And it just says that the director of the Department of Audit shall certify to the director of the Department of Revenue a list of those entities that have not addressed findings of noncompliance as required by subsection C. The director of the Department of Revenue shall withhold the monthly disbursements of state and local sales, use, and lodging tax revenues to that entity beginning the following month until the director of the Department of Audit certifies that the non-compliant entity has come into compliance or that good cause for non-compliance is shown to the director of the Department of Audit. All withheld disbursements shall be retained by the Department of Revenue in the account from which they would have been made until the entity comes into compliance with subsection C or as otherwise provided by law. Requires the director of audit to certify to the Department of Revenue when the county comes into compliance, and then requires the Department of Revenue to certify monthly to the Department of Audit, the legislature, and the non-compliant entity the amount of disbursements that were withheld. And then 6 is for special districts or other smaller entities. The director certifies that to the applicable Board of County Commissioners and the county treasurer. And then the county treasurer withholds the disbursements of money to that district until, again, the director of the Department of Audit certifies to the county treasurer that the district has come into compliance with subsection C. And then the county treasurer certifies monthly to the Department of Audit, the legislature, and the district on the amount of disbursements that are withheld. So that's essentially the bill, Mr. Chairman, and I take any questions.
Are there any questions? Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your report there. On the bill, just so I'm understanding it correctly, the only penalty right now is if they haven't complied within 3 years that withhold their sales, use, lodging tax, et cetera. Would there be a place in the bill? I'm not sure where it would go. I mean, if there's no teeth in it, I mean, I know in my business, if you don't have a late fee on anything, there's no reason to comply. You can drag it out as long as you want until somebody barks real loud and says, we need our money. You know, I'm looking at the one here in Idaho, and that's a pretty tough penalty right there after 30 days. You know, it's $500 a day. And that wakes people up that are sleeping on their duty to comply. Could you suggest maybe a spot in here to add some language if there was amendment to have a penalty for noncompliance, a monetary penalty after a period of time? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, certainly I think that could be done if that's the direction of the committee. I don't know off the top of my head if I have a great spot for it, other than maybe we could add a new paragraph, maybe 7, that if after a certain period of noncompliance, an additional penalty of similar to Idaho. So I think we could do it that way, would be one option, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up? No. Any other questions? I don't see any. I think we're good. Thank you. Next on the agenda is to take listen to non-compliance and challenges faced by municipalities and districts. And the first person listed is Ashley Harpstreth. And I don't know if you're all joining together or are we separate in the discussion? And we'll just go to Ashley.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Yes, go ahead.
Great. If it's okay, introducing myself, my name is Ashley Harpstreet. I'm the Executive Director for Wyoming Association of Municipalities, but I'd like to combine my comments to streamline for both the response to this bill and the challenges we face and actually come with some proactive solutions. Would that be okay?
I would rather you tell us your issues, the challenges, I think, and then we'll open it up to public comment. I think that's what we should do.
Okay.
Right?
Sure. Okay. So just as an overview, WAM exists to help our member communities govern well, providing the education, training, and best practices local leaders need to deliver the services their residents depend on every day. Transparency is of the utmost importance to our communities and to WAM, and that starts with sound financial management. As I've shared in previous testimony at your last committee meeting, we stood up the Wyoming Municipal Finance Program in direct response to a clear and growing need within our membership. Many of our smallest communities simply do not have the staff capacity or specialized accounting expertise to keep pace with the day-to-day service delivery alongside increasingly complex financial reporting requirements from evolving governmental accounting standards board standards to shifting federal and state requirements. Couple that with a high staff turnover and a national CPA shortage, and there's a desperate need for technical assistance just to stay in compliance. I'm proud to say our program is led by Shari Lara, who has spent 19 years as the city treasurer for the city of Lander and holds a master's in accounting along with her CPA, ACPFA, and ACPFIM credentials. Through that program, member municipalities can access professional support, accounts payable and receivable, grant writing, and preparation of the state-required F66 annual financial report. The goal is straightforward: give Wyoming's towns access to the financial expertise they need without requiring them to build it in-house, where the cost and talent often simply are just not there. The response from member communities has been encouraging. The town of Hudson credited the program with helping them build a clearer financial structure and budget more effectively. The town of Opal has spoken to the peace of mind that comes from knowing their finances are in qualified and responsive hands. However, even among the communities we have not been able to assist, we continue to hear the troubling concerns, and part of this with that bill as drafted will not help move us forward. It's going to move us backwards. And so a lot of it is, and I'll talk about this when you're ready for me to open up about the comments on the bill. But we have issues with timelines, we have issues with staffing, and then these additional challenges that this bill is going to push on us.
I think I will let you go ahead and discuss the bill. I
Right,
think that'd
I really-
probably be proper.
Okay.
Instead of bringing everybody up here and then going back. So if you have comments on the bill, I think that'd be okay.
Thank you. I think it will address everything holistically. So on the question of non-compliance response rates, I want to respectfully push back on the assumption that local governments simply wait until the last minute to file. So right now we have Hannah on there as non-compliance. And in our experience, and specifically with Hannah, the delay is not always about accuracy or not. It's about accuracy, not procrastination. So they're waiting on their CPA to bring back their information. They're held hostage. So many small towns are struggling to find the expertise they need to hire a CPA at all. Larger cities often have component units that must be reconciled before a completed report can be submitted. On top of that, communities operate on a mix of cash accrual and accounting systems, and many are managing not just the F66, but 3 additional census reports with already stretched staff. As drafted, 27 LSO 0115 requires that within 90 days of receiving a third consecutive audit finding, the local government must submit a mandatory written report to the Department of Audit explaining what corrective steps have been taken. If that report is not submitted within 90 days, the state may begin withholding monthly sales use and lodging tax disbursements, one of the most severe financial penalties that can be imposed on a small municipalities. We have 4 fundamental objections to this approach. First, the penalty defeats its own purpose. Without withholding sales and lodging tax disbursements from a struggling community does not create compliance. It's going to create a financial crisis. For many small Wyoming towns, these monthly disbursements are their primary source of operating revenue. You cannot fix a financial management problem or hire someone to help you by eliminating those resources needed to manage those finances. The consequences also reach well beyond the municipality itself. When a county's disbursements are withheld, every downstream agency suffers. Fremont County's current situation is a real-world example where withheld sales tax revenue has directly impacted the Wind River Visitors Council's ability to operate. The ripple effects are broader and more damaging than this bill acknowledges. Secondly, you cannot penalize a capacity problem. Persistent audit findings in small Wyoming communities are almost never the result of negligence. They are the result of chronic understaffing, high turnover, uncompetitive wages, and a national CPA shortage that hits rural communities the hardest. This bill punishes communities for a structural workforce problem they did not create and cannot solve overnight, while offering nothing to help them solve it. Third, 90 days is not workable. For a small town already stretched thin, a 90-day window to investigate, document, and formally report on multi-year audit findings is not a reasonable requirement. It is an impossible one for the communities this bill targets. Fourth, the good cause exception is a little too vague for us. The bill provides no definition or standards for what qualifies as a good cause, leaving excessive discretion to the Department of Audit and creating significant uncertainty for communities trying in good faith to comply. To summarize, we believe this standard is wrong. Enforcement should be triggered by audit findings, which can include minor technical deficiencies. It should be reserved for audit reports returning an adverse opinion or disclaimer of an opinion, the most serious outcomes in the profession, indicating material misstatement or inability to form an opinion at all. Those situations warrant escalated action. Routine technical findings do not. I'm not here strictly to oppose. I want to come with some recommendations as we fully support accountability and transparency in local government financial management. And we believe in it so much, we have built a program around it. So here's what we think you could do to move the needle. One is adjust those filing timelines. Modifying the F66 filing deadline for communities that undergo a full audit would immediately reduce late filings and improve accuracy. And we would have nobody out of compliance because Hannah's facing that right now. Most late filings are not the result of negligence. They are the result of communities waiting on their auditors before they can accurately complete the report. Aligning the timeline with audit completion is simple. Logical fix that would eliminate a significant portion of late filings overnight. Number 2 is the most important. Eliminate the F66 for audited entities and replace it with audit report posting. If a municipality goes to the expense of a full third-party audit, requiring them to also complete a separate F66 is unnecessary and duplicative and burdensome. The audit contains everything the Department of Audit needs for its reporting purposes. WAM recommends that communities that complete a full audit be exempted from the F66 requirement entirely, and that is in the interest of transparency. A copy of each entity's financial statements be posted on the Department Audit's website so they are all in one place. Most communities already are making their financials publicly available, but this would be a one-stop shop for transparent reasons. This approach would reduce workload at the Department of Audit, eliminate redundancy for communities, and actually improve public transparency. Fourth, we would require, and then we would ask that you require financial training for newly elected officials within their first year of office. We would also encourage the committee to consider strengthening Wyoming's existing training requirement for newly elected municipal officials. Currently, Wyoming law requires this training, but sets no timeline for completion and imposes no penalty if it is never completed, which means it is practice and it is often not completed at all. Georgia provides a compelling and proven model. Since 1990, Georgia state law has required all newly elected municipal officers to complete the Newly Elected Officials Institute, administered jointly through the Georgia Municipal Association and the University of Georgia's Carl Vinson Institute of Government, within their first year of taking office. The training covers city finance and budgeting, ethics, public safety, land use, and meeting management. Wyoming should adopt a similar enforceable standard with a clear timeline and a meaningful consequence for non-completion. And just so you know, we're in the process of, well, we already offer this, but we are right now offering this together with Laramie County Community College. And we'll be having this at every conference moving forward, and then hope to compartmentalize this to disperse through the community college system as we get it onboarded. Elected officials who genuinely understand their community's finances are far less likely to oversee a community with persistent audit problems. And getting that training done in the first year of service rather than years into a term or never makes all the difference. And then finally, my last recommendation is an and/or require technical assistance before penalties. Before any financial penalty is triggered, communities should be connected to structured technical assistance, including WAM's municipal finance program, and given a real supported pathway to compliance. Penalize communities that refuse help. Do not penalize communities that simply just need it. We believe that pairing these practical reforms with WAM's expanding fiscal officer training, educational programming, and municipal finance program services would produce far better outcomes than a punitive enforcement mechanism aimed at communities that are already doing their best with limited resources. We are committed to being a constructive partner in this work and welcome the opportunity to discuss any of these recommendations further. Thank you for your time and continued focus on strengthening local government accountability across Wyoming.
First off, I think I'll go ahead and start. I don't see where a penalty in the bill that we're considering, the proposed bill, I see it starting at 3 years. Is that not what you see?
Mr. Chairman, yes, but I think the penalty of holding their income, the sales tax, is the one that we're concerned about, and just any penalties at all without any proactive assistance, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay. I guess my comeback would be they've had 3 years to come into compliance, and it sounds like the findings are similar in those 3 years. So there has been quite a bit of time, but that's kind of what the bill says, the proposed bill. Is there any other comments? Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today. My question is, how does your organization come in and ask us to make these recommendations when places like Idaho that also have rural communities are already making these deadlines within their community with substantial penalties if they don't comply? Why would we not make the same standard for Wyoming to make us better?
Mr. Chairman, Representative.
Yes, Ms. Hartstreth.
Thank you for that question. I'm just speaking on the behalf of my constituents and the feedback for the current law in our state.
Senator Ide.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hartstreth, yeah, this is kind of a follow-up to Representative Lean's question. Idaho's probably a really good analogy to take a look at here. They've got some pretty stiff penalties there, and they have a lot of small towns. Have you looked at that at all to see if, that makes a difference on making people move a little quicker if they're getting punished? Thank you.
Ms. Hartstreth.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide, I have not. I've just watched my constituents that are struggling currently in our state, and I'm seeing the ones that are fumbling are lacking capacity, and we're just trying to help them in a proactive sense. So nobody is on your bad list, and we don't even have to look at penalties. So we are looking more of like what we can do to lift them up instead of tear them down. Thank you.
Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Hartstreth. Question for you on the training that you've proposed, all this training you proposed. What of that training is new, is not currently available to these people that, is it currently a situation it just doesn't exist? Or is this a situation where they're just not going to use it? I'm a little confused that there's this whole training program proposed. Is that something you're saying, hey, put this in a statute? That seems crazy to me. Going back to local control component, what if this is not available from a training perspective, and what's new? I guess I'm a little confused by that, because it would seem to me that this type of training is available somewhere. Is this an issue of they're just not using it? I don't know. Help me out with that, please.
Ms. Hartstreth.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, let me back up. So originally Wyoming, it is already in law that they should go through a fiscal officer training. And I think 3 or 4 years ago, together with Department of Audit, we have rolled out a training program. So Department of Audit has it on call as needed. They do webinars to complete that fiscal officer training. We have always had it at the beginning of all of our conferences. So there's another opportunity for in-person training. And I do believe Department of Audit sometimes does some in-person training, and they can talk further about that for all the other local governments. We have realized and seen the need. I mean, those classes fill up super fast, that it needs to be available more on demand for our members. And then we're also seeing those that have been in office for a long time feel like they don't need to complete it, where I think that there's a lot of, things are always evolving and changing, that it would be good for them to have a baseline of that training. So I think requiring them, especially as we've just had a big election, there's going to be a lot of turnover. People understanding the requirements to be in charge of a government budget. It's different than a business budget, and doing that within their first year of governing would help us be proactive and avoid a lot of these issues, because a lot of times they don't know what they don't know. What we're hearing from our constituents too is, not always can they make our meetings. So what we would like to do as we're building this program and adding more components to it, be able to offer it through the community college system, so it can come to them where they are, and they don't have to wait till twice a year, or the webinars that DOA provides. And then it's standardized, at least for my members, in municipal finance.
Follow up? Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
The program I've been studying is with Georgia. They have it, and you were asking about putting it in statute. They have worked very carefully together with their lawmakers to make that a requirement. And that's what I was suggesting through my testimony, to make sure that people are doing it within a year.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to interrupt. You mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation that you feel that this bill would move us backwards. Can I ask, in what regards do you believe that this would move the municipalities across Wyoming backwards?
Ms. Harpstreth.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean, per my comments, I think that those that are struggling are lacking capacity or ability to leverage a CPA or funding to have the right technical expertise in there. So shortening those timelines, creating an ability to access funds to hire a CPA or a different entity to help them work through whatever issues they're facing, I think is where we feel like it would take us backwards.
Any other questions? Don't see any. All right, we'll move on. I see the Johnson County Commission and Johnson County Deputy Attorney are here. I think we'll have them come forward and give us their testimony on non-compliance and challenges faced by the municipalities and districts, and then comment on the bill. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bill Novotny, Chair of the Johnson County Commission, and I want to thank the Budget and Audit Committee, and specifically at your last meeting, Senator Larson requesting that Johnson County appear before this committee here in Casper, 2 days after a historic election in a building aptly named after Wyoming's longest-serving Secretary of State. I want to set the record straight on inaccuracies and outright lies which have been leveled against our county. Johnson County has not failed its audit for the past 9 years. Misstatements are being made and facts are being twisted about what an audit finding is and what a clean audit entails. Statements so outlandish that I have some beachfront property on the Powder River for sale if you believe that hogwash. The 4 types of audit opinions are the unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit report, and then there are 3 types of modified opinions. The qualified opinion, which is a good audit with exceptions. The adverse opinion, which is an audit which identifies misstatements or negative financial information. And the last, which would be a disclaimer of opinion where no opinion is given because the auditor cannot complete the audit. These statements reflect an independent auditor's formal evaluation of a government entity's financial records. In the 12 years that I have been a Johnson County Commissioner, we have passed our audit and received an unmodified opinion, which is a clean audit. I have confirmed that with our auditors and against the audit reports that the commissioners receive each year. Let me state this again. Johnson County continues to have an unmodified opinion, which is a favorable audit report. Over that time frame, there have been findings in our audits, just as many Wyoming County cities or special districts may have. Some of the people even seated at this dais may have an audit findings at the local government entities that they previously served in. One of Johnson County's findings is that we do not have a certified public accountant on staff. The answer is, it's just not financially practical for Johnson County to employ a full-time CPA to complete the conversion from cash to GAAP. It makes greater fiduciary sense to contract with a firm when possible to complete this task rather than relying on our auditors. Johnson County employed an outside accounting firm for several years to assist with this preparation. Unfortunately, the Buffalo accountant we worked with left that firm, and then we eventually had to terminate the contract with that local accounting firm because they failed to produce the reports in a timely fashion to meet the audit deadlines. The firm has since closed its doors in Buffalo. For the past 2 years following that termination, Johnson County was unsuccessful in getting any accounting firm to bid on our request for proposal to provide those outside accounting services. Several years ago, we were able to contract with a firm from Sheridan to provide those services, but frankly, it hasn't been at the level of service that I had hoped for. Another request for proposal will be going out this fall for CPA services once we complete our current audit. There are less than 10 firms in Wyoming that do these large government audits, with the 2 large firms based in Casper and Cheyenne, providing the bulk of the work that is done. Johnson County uses a firm out of Casper. We are limited in the scope of the regional firms that we can engage for outside accounting services because several of those firms provide audit or financial review services for our local special districts. So it creates a bit of a conflict. I've noticed that during previous meetings of this committee, you have not invited any Wyoming audit firms to share their thoughts on improving this process. Recently, the Wyoming County Treasurers Association met with auditors from across the state to review the most common findings across county audits and ways to remediate them. I would encourage this committee to ask the county treasurers to provide any reports, handouts, or PowerPoints that were presented at this meeting so that we can be proactive rather than adversarial. Those audit firms may also point to the difficulty in completing the audits in the timeframe of September 1st to December 31st because of the available workforce in Wyoming and the number of governmental audits that need to be completed. You also need to engage the University of Wyoming and our community colleges because there appears to be a shortage of students going into government accounting, and that will be exacerbated by the great gray retirement wave that is about to crash down on Wyoming. Looking at the broader discussion between cash-based accounting, accrual, and GAAP, you might find it interesting that the Government Accountability Office has been auditing the federal government's consolidated financial statements since 1997, as well as the various other federal financial statements. The GAO continues to be unable to render an audit opinion on the government's accrual-based consolidated financial statements, which presents their historical information such as assets, liabilities, revenue, and net costs. And the primary reason for that is serious fiscal mismanagement at the Department of Defense, the federal government's inability to adequately account for intergovernmental activity and balances transferred between federal agencies, and weaknesses in the federal government's process for preparing the consolidated financial statements. Further, GAO continues to be unable to render an audit opinion on the government's sustained financial statements, which represent their spending and receipts over the next 75 years, primarily due to significant uncertainties related to Medicare cost growth. So if you look at what federal government is unable to accomplish in terms of audits, your local governments are heads and tails above their federal counterparts. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to address some statements and honor the request from Senator Larson to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Novotny? Representative Locke.
Thank you. You speak a little bit, and you're obviously much deeper in some of these details, but a question for you. So talking about just in general, at least my understanding of some of the violations that might have been out there. So my understanding that your audits were late 9 years in a row. Is that accurate or is that not accurate? That's my understanding that they were reported late 9 years in a row.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Black, I am not aware of that. I'm going to look to my civil deputy for that answer.
Mr. Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Barry Crago, Deputy County Attorney for Johnson County. So Representative Locke, Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke. So if you pull out this little report, which is your non-compliant report, which is whether your stuff was filed late or not, there are 22 counties on that. Albany, Bighorn, Campbell, Carbon, Converse, Crook, Fremont, Goshen, Hot Springs, Laramie, Lincoln, Natrona, Niobrara, Park, Platte, Sheridan, Sublette, Sweetwater, Teton, Uinta, Washakie, and Weston. Do you notice I missed one county? And that would be Johnson. That would be us. We are the only county not on the non-compliant report from 2025 as of August 1st. So that should answer your question, at least for last year. Again, to answer the question more broadly though, so we deal with last year, there are probably years where every entity ends up missing the deadline by a few days because you are waiting on an auditor to get that done. There are so few auditors that can do this level of auditing for counties that you are on a list, right? So they're one of them that it gets used is right here in Casper. It is the one that we use at Johnson County, and we're not the only entity that they have to audit, right? It's not just counties, it's other entities within the state. And so we have a shortage. And so I think it would be helpful to get some of them into your next meeting and ask them, what's wrong with the time frame, right? So we have a very short time period to get all of that stuff in, right? Representative Lean asked about, well, what's different than us versus Idaho? It's the timeline, right? So we have 3 months. Other states are much longer than that. You know, at least 6 months. Many of them are up to a year to get your audits in. So it's the time frame that's really hard for a lot of these, especially smaller entities, to get all of their stuff done and get their audits in to the department.
And Mr. Larson, Mr. Chairman, if I could add one thing.
Yes, go ahead.
Share that just the scope of what this costs your local government. In fiscal year 18-19, our audit was about $74,000. It's now over $125,000. So it is a substantial financial investment that we make in completing that process. But as Mr. Craigo alluded to, we are also subject to what is available in terms of workforce and their availability to complete that. If there is then additional follow-on, that can even set that report back further.
Any other questions? Follow up? Yes, Representative Locke.
Sure. Another follow-up, and this is just a question just because I've seen some information and looking at some of these reports. One of the issues that has come up, and I'd just be curious to hear your opinion on this, because some of the material findings that were found were related to gap compliance. And there were some questions and kind of the response, some of the responses from Johnson County where we don't find that is important. As it turns out, that's at least in the statute, but I'd like to hear you the question on that. And sorry, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think I skipped that part. Thank you. Thank you for being here. But I was curious about that. I have noticed in the comments, there are questions like, we don't necessarily think that's, I'm not quoting perfectly, so bear with me here, but we don't see the importance of gap, and I might have slightly misquoted that, but at the end of the day, I'd just like to understand where the opinion is there. I understand that you have there's this shortage in this concept, but obviously that's in statute as well. So I'd just like to hear your discussion on that. Thank you.
Mr. Novotny or Mr. Craigo?
Senator Larson, Representative Locke, in the time that I've been a commissioner, I've never had a conversation with our auditors about gap. If there is any reference to that in there, it would have come from conversations that happened either between our clerk or our treasurer with the auditor. And again, that would be the opinion of the auditor. We take gap very seriously. We do our very best to put those things together. And it actually worked quite well when we had an accounting firm in town that was able to assist with preparing the conversion of those documents from cash over to the gap.
Mr. Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke. So I think if you were to pull up, and you can ask the department, but if you were to pull out every audit from every public entity in the state of Wyoming, most of them are going to have that finding. The great majority of them are, because they don't have CPAs on staff to do the conversion from what most of our entities are doing is cash-based accounting to convert that over to GAAP, which is accrual-based, right? And so what happens for us in Johnson County, I can't speak for all the other entities, but for our county, right, the auditors end up doing that conversion. And because they end up doing that conversion on the financial statements, they have to make that finding and note that in our audit. If you go review our audit, it will say the actual auditors right. They're the ones that make the statement, not us. So the auditors note that yes, it's a finding, but there's really no corrective action recommended unless we can get a CPA on staff, because they can do it. We can either let them do it as part of the process, the money we pay them to do the audit, or we can grow government and we can go pay a CPA a bunch of money to do all of those conversions for us as part of our, creating a new office in the county. Our county commissioners have elected to save the taxpayers money and let the auditors actually do the conversion for us, and then it shows up right in the statements and does comply with law at that point. So that's kind of the decision, I think, broader discussion about the GAAP requirement. We end up meeting it. It's just not at the time, and the auditors have to do it. Hopefully that answers the question, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Craig, Mr. Crago, for joining us today, and Mr. Novotny. I'm grateful that you brought up other entities, because I was curious what was going on out there in Wyoming. And so I looked at Star Valley, and they were able to ensure that they're GAAP compliant. And so I'm wondering, if Star Valley is much smaller revenue than Johnson County, can the GAAP compliant prior to the audit be done? Why can't Johnson County accomplish what Star Valley's accomplishing?
Mr. Novotny or Crago?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I can't comment on how Star Valley does their finances because I've never had the opportunity to look at them. But certainly we strive every year after that audit report comes out to work to improve. And certainly as we go through a transition of a new clerk and treasurer, they may ask that we find a way to bring in in-house CPA that can do that. So certainly we are constantly striving to improve, to protect our taxpayers, and do the very best that we can for the people and our constituents.
Any other questions? Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question, and this is just kind of a little bit two-part here, so bear with me. But do you guys have a good feel for what I would call maybe the recurring issues that may be out there? I have seen in some reports some what is referred to as maybe material weaknesses in internal controls on the financial reporting. Can you help us with that? And it is my understanding that has been mentioned repeatedly. So I want to understand, what does that mean, and what has Johnson County done to resolve those issues? Now, admittedly, that's very general, that material controls, but that would be helpful for me. Thank you.
Mr. Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Locke, actually, great question, because I was going to bring it up. That is another very common finding on audits in Wyoming for your in particular, your small local government entities, because they don't have enough staff to separate certain duties. And that's what the internal control about is, how many double checks can we have on the expenditures of money? Chairman Larson, you probably remember this when you ran an irrigation district, right? You would have had that finding on your audit every single year. There's really nothing you can do about it unless we want to grow government exponentially. And so based on government accounting standards, that has to be a finding. The auditors are required to say, hey, you guys don't have valid internal controls. We understand there's nothing you can necessarily do about it. They make some minor suggestions year to year. We try to do those. Sometimes you can do them, sometimes you can't. But if that becomes an issue, for example, we can talk about this bill in a minute on the local government audit compliance. If that particular finding is going to keep entities from getting their sales tax, most entities in Wyoming will not get their sales tax because they just won't be able to afford to grow government enough to comply with the internal control standards of the government auditing standards, I guess is the best way to put it. Representative Locke, I hope that answers your question.
Follow up?
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for that. I'm not surprised from that perspective but another question, and one of the things that has been brought up, and Ms. Harpstrath actually brought it up as well, was the whole training issue, because I do know that showed up on your reports consistently as well. So I guess I'm asking a broader question. I'm not asking the issues brought up. Do we have enough training? Do we not have enough training? But my question is, and I'm going to kind of go back to the question I asked her. It seems to me there's got to be training out there somewhere in the junior colleges or wherever it's got to be. What is the barrier to training? It seems like this training is available. What we're figuring out now, which seems like we're a little late in the game, is these people should have always been going through this training. This training should have been available for a very long time. I guess I'm trying to understand, why does this keep showing up as the training's the issue? Understanding, yeah, admittedly that we're having turnover, but help me with that issue, because I know that's shown up. You probably will say it shows up on a lot of audits, but I guess I'd like to understand the issue better with the whole training process, because a person takes this job, not an easy job. And let's not kid ourselves, but thank you.
Mr. Novotny?
Senator Larson, Representative Locke, the training, and I've been through the financial training that was mandated by the Wyoming Legislature. That was, I think, about 3-4 years ago. Took a day, great class. Your state associations, whether it's the Commissioners Association, WAM, the Treasurers Association, the Clerks Association, they do their very best to also provide some of the best training. I will actually tell you where you wouldn't think about it. One of the best trainings that actually could happen, most of your counties use Tyler Technologies software to handle those internal controls, the movement of transactions that move between your clerk's office, your treasurer's office, then also as they work to prepare their abstract at the end of the year that they have to submit to the state. Honestly, and that's a private company vendor, and we've tried for several years to get them to come in and work with our clerk's office and our treasurer's office. It would be great if actually all the cities, towns, and counties that use Tyler Tech it might require you to have to close your clerk and your treasurer's office for a day or two, but to get them into the room with those folks who make the governmental accounting software and really understand all of the functionalities that are available in it, when they do run into issues where maybe a transaction gets coded to the wrong account, how to make those adjustments and corrections so those happen before the auditors come in and pull a file or a voucher.
Follow up? Representative Lean. Oh, let me go back.
No, you're all right.
Senator Ide's been waiting, and we're going to get Senator Ide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator Crago, Mr. Novotny. Good to see you guys. Hope things are going good up in the Johnson County country. The one thing that kind of strikes me, I missed the last meeting, so I'm kind of getting all up to date here, but that the gap standards that are statute, so as far as I know, I mean, if we let if we're flimsy on that, I mean, I'm all with Senator Crago. We don't want to grow government. Efficiency is good, keep the expenses down for the taxpayers. But are we opening up Pandora's box here? If one county doesn't want to do gap standards, then what happens to everybody else? I mean, do they all just say nobody's enforcing it? We don't need to comply with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just to be clear, Senator Ide, it's not that we're not doing it. The auditors are converting all of our financial statements to GAAP for us. So it's just we're not doing it on a day-to-day basis. So when our final audit comes out, it is GAAP. it is on an accrual basis. The auditors, our auditing company, which we use a company here in Casper, they do that conversion for us. But because they're doing the conversion, they then make a finding on the audit, noting that they had to do the conversion. That's the finding. And so it's not that we're not doing it, it's just that they're doing it for us and we don't have a CPA on staff to do it day by day by day. So it's not that we're not complying. I think it's a broader discussion, if I put on my legislator hat for just a second, on how we want to deal with that going forward, because you have so many small towns that have one employee. And if that one employee is, that does all the book, it's the town clerk, town treasurer, and might pick up garbage on Saturdays, literally. I know of several of those that they don't have the capability to do GAAP. They're not trained to do accrual-based accounting. Now they can manage cash-based accounting, right? It's dollars in, dollars out. They can handle that. Doing accrual becomes much more of a problem for them. That then makes their audits, probably more expensive to get all that work done. Broader discussion, but I don't disagree with you. It should be done. That's what the law says. We do it. It's just we do it at a later time.
Yes, follow up. Senator
Thank
Wright.
you for that. That helps. So as far as you're concerned, you are complying with the GAAP statute that we have on the books without having a full-time accountant on staff to comply. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Novotny.
Senator Lawrence, Senator Wright, yes, we are. And that's why you see that we have an unmodified opinion from our auditors. And that's one of the reasons that we're the only county not on that list, not in compliance.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question is, similar to the Wyoming Association of Municipalities, is there something that WCCA could be doing as well to bring kind of all the smaller counties to at least one resource, and maybe include that in membership? Because that kills two birds with one stone. Is, with membership should come some items that counties aren't able to do on their own, especially smaller counties and smaller cities and towns. And then also having one member on staff at a WCCA or WAM lets them work on that every day for all counties or all cities and kind of justifies that position. What's your opinion on that?
Mr. Novotny.
Senator Larson, Representative Knapp, I'm going to go back to actually a situation where the Wyoming Legislature gave the counties to the authority to oversee our workman's comp program. And unfortunately, we couldn't get all 23 counties into agreement that would have then funded a position within the WCCA that would help all the counties with workman's comp. I think the idea that the state association would be tasked with having one person to help folks get in compliance with GAAP really isn't practical, and it really isn't what our association is for, which is to educate members. And you, within that, you have some commissioners who choose not to participate in WCCA education or activities, just as Ms. Harpstreet has some mayors, council people who maybe don't participate in the educational offerings that WAM does. But I think that there is ways in continuing to offer those educational opportunities and looking at those timeframes when those reports have to be submitted to Department of Audit really would be the more productive things that we can do to help counties, cities, and special districts that struggle with this issue.
Follow up, Representative Knapp.
No, thank you.
Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Novotny, you said sometimes the transactions are coded to the wrong accounts. Can you walk me through how often that's happening?
Mr. Novotny.
Senator Larson, Representative Lean, it just depends. And typically when those things are caught the first time, they're corrected. Unfortunately, occasionally there is, especially in governmental entities that are running a lot of financial transactions through every day. But certainly every department head that signs off on vouchers does everything to make sure that those are coded to the right accounts. If they catch an error, those are corrected.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
Senator McEwen.
I really want to understand the difference between GAAP accounting and cash accounting. Maybe somebody can explain that to me.
Mr. Craigle.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I can't explain it. I can tell you that I am not a CPA, and I think that's part of the problem, that the average person, the average county employee that works in your treasurer's or clerk's office doesn't either. And I think you're getting right at the root of the problem. So we'll figure, we can get someone much more qualified. I think there's some people in the back of the room that could come up and tell you, but appreciate the question.
Well, I hope so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the direction that I feel this conversation is heading, I would like to understand why we would move away from GAAP when we obviously have private industry that is required to pay for GAAP for their tax purposes. Why would we that function with government dollars that are the people's money move away from that standard?
Mr. Craigle.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that all industry has to be GAAP. There are certain entities that don't have to be. Again, I don't know which ones those are, other than I know just enough to know that not all industry is GAAP. Lots of it functions on a cash basis. You know, when you form an entity and we first start doing your tax returns, you get to make an election, but that would be another, again, certain of them have to be GAAP, but not all. That's a question for maybe some of the folks in the back of the room that do have those 3 letters behind their name that I do not have.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? I don't see any. Mr. Craigle.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I might just make a couple of comments about the bill draft for y'all to think about, just from, looking at it from our perspective as the county. On page 2, you talk about, a finding of non-compliance. Audits aren't going to have a finding of non-compliance. And so you'd have to define that terminology. Most of your audits are going to talk about material weaknesses, significant weaknesses. They use different terminology in the government accounting realm. And so when we think of non-compliance in a local government perspective, we're thinking about failing to file anything. Failing to file on time, failing to file the proper document. So there's all these things that get you non-compliant. And so just for I think Committee A needs to, review that language and realize that non-compliance is a government term. It's not an auditor term. And so you might want to work on that language as you work the bill, because that is not going to, it's not going to jive with our terminology, nor the Department of Audits. They'll probably tell you the same thing, but I'm just concerned that if we're, right now the statute talks about non-compliance. Well, that's just failing to file the proper documents correctly on time, right? And that's what we penalize entities for doing. We don't currently penalize entities for having material weaknesses. Those, there can be issues that the Department of Audit can address, but that's it. We don't penalize for weaknesses within the audit. We don't penalize for findings. And I think that's what this bill draft's attempting to get at, is findings. But if it is, then we need to change the terminology and do something a little bit different. But anyways, just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for having us.
Representative Locke.
Again, thank you for coming here. Another item that comes up in some of the comments is questions about, in some of the audit observations are issues about no receipts not available. So some of the information is not clear. This comes up, and one of the cases was there. At least this is what one of the comments was: no documentation on receipts for example, certain distributions. I'm just curious, how often do you see this? How is this reviewed and handled within your system? Because this comes up a few times in some of the audit observations, and I'm just curious how you guys have addressed that, if you've seen that, if that's been looked at really closely.
Mr. Craigle?
Representatives, could you give us some more context? You know, what audit, what year, exactly what we're talking about? Because I mean, we could be talking about last year's audit or one 10 years ago. I have really no clue.
Representative Locke?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, thank you. That's great. So it was my understanding there was a lack of documentation related to some disbursements in 21. I'm sorry, I'm going back a ways, but this was, and then there were several other observations, and I'm sorry, these are not connected to a year, or I would give you better details. I apologize for that, but it's just things mentioned in the audit reports, and I don't have good years to those, and I'm sorry, I should have documented it better.
Mr. Novotny?
Yes. Mr. Chairman, Representative Locke, I think what you're referencing is COVID-19 dollars that came from the state of Wyoming used the Office of State Lands and Investments. It was previously, I think, touched on. It was $180,391.91 given to local organizations that focused on 3 areas that we were tasked with by the governor during COVID-19. In the area of food security, $50,000 went to the Buffalo Senior Center. $50,000 went to the Bread of Life Food Pantry, which is operated by St. Luke's Episcopal Church. $10,000 went to Friends Feeding Friends, which oversees the local weekend food feeding program for school kids. In the area of rental assistance and energy assistance, $10,000 to the Family Crisis Center, $2,500 to the Community Resource Center, $2,500 to the Buffalo Ministerial Association. In the area of support of children, which we were charged by the governor in that program, $10,000 to the Buffalo Children's Center, $10,000 to the YMCA, $10,000 to Compass Center for Families, $5,000 to the Boys and Girls Club, and the remaining $2,392.91 was awarded to the Northern Wyoming Mental Health. None of these entities were businesses, as was alluded to. These were all not-for-profits that the county has had long-standing relationships. We used the paperwork provided by the Wyoming Office of State Lands in that application process. We met our constitutionally mandated support for the poor, the mental health, welfare, and safety of our constituents. So we do everything we can. We have a form if somebody does not have a receipt where they have to sign an affidavit swearing that the expense was allowable under our system. That's then signed off by their supervisor. Again, we do everything within our power to protect the taxpayers' dollars. And certainly we did with that COVID money with local organizations that we have had long-standing relationships providing needed services to the most vulnerable people in my community.
Representative Locke, follow up? Nope. Senator McEwen?
Sorry, couldn't find the button. My question is, how in the world do I, owning 2 supermarkets, have to follow GAP standards and the government doesn't? Really that simple. Sorry.
Mr. Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, again, I think that's a better question for one of the CPAs. I know there's probably somewhere in the room that could answer that, but I think it's a complicated list of deciding who has to and who doesn't. And right now, the government does have to. Statutorily, we have to convert all of our financial statements to GAAP for purposes of the audit. So that is still, I mean, it happens. All of us, all of the entities have to do it one way or another. Again, the finding relates to the timing and who actually does it, which in this case is the auditors.
Follow up?
No, I'm good.
Representative Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Novotny, for that breakdown. In one of your audits, it was said that the charity organizations didn't have any expenses documented for the money that they received. And so I'm curious to know, How did Johnson County address that? And could you give me the total dollar amount that you stated was given out again?
Mr. Novotny.
$182,391.91. That you can confirm that with the Office of State Lands if you need to. They provided reports back to the commissioners with how they utilize the funds. And we continue to engage with those entities, whether it's pass-through dollars through TANF, because they continue to correctly report the dollars that we give to them and provide the services that they are tasked with doing under the whatever activity that they are tasked with doing with those dollars.
Follow up, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is it a fair understanding to say that given the governor's directive is how that money was distributed and Johnson County did not ask for expenditures when passing it out?
Mr. Novotny, sorry.
Senator Larson, those COVID dollars had to be obligated before the end of the calendar year. We received them in December. We held a special meeting where those were awarded in a public meeting with minutes that are recorded. They then were awarded their dollars to cover those areas that they were charged with, and they provided a report back. So if you need me to find you a grocery receipt for what the Bread of Life food pantry did for how many loaves of bread, certainly we could go back to them and get that. But there was a follow-up to make sure that those dollars were spent appropriately.
Mr. Kriegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to chime in, the statutory authority for this committee allows you to do audits, real audits. In fact, I think it allows you to do a whole lot more than that if we really want to start digging into that. And so my suggestion would be, you're asking us questions, Representative Lean, about things that happened 6, maybe 7 years ago without a whole lot of notice. If you want to come and find out what's going on in the local government entities, come do it. We're happy to oblige. It's just sometimes we show up, we deal with a lot of different stuff, as you know. You deal with a lot of different stuff as a legislator. So asking us about something that happened 6 years ago without a little bit of notice gets a little bit difficult. There is a procedure in the statutes that allow you to direct LSO to go do the audits for you and report back to you in executive session. That might be a good thing to look into because I don't think it's actually been used that much, but that's what the statute allows. And so it might be something you look at. Thank you.
Follow up?
Follow
Yep,
up.
please.
Thank you. Mr. Novotny, you mentioned a public meeting with public minutes. Would you be able to supply that to the LSO to be able to send to the committee?
Mr. Novotny.
Sorry about that. I told our road and bridge supervisor coming down here, make sure you touch the thing so the green button comes on. Senator Larson, Representative, yes, we're happy to get those from our clerk's office. And actually, they probably are readily available on our county webpage with all of our meeting minutes, as well as copies of our audits and other financial documents. But we will make sure that we send those off to Mr. Petrie.
Thank you. Any other questions? Don't see any. I might ask our LSO staff, is there anywhere that you know of definition for finding of non-compliance?
Mr. Chairman, no, it's certainly something we could add to the bill, or if there's another appropriate language that someone may suggest, I think that would be appropriate to add as we work the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And maybe we can ask Department of Audit that same question. All right. I think we're done. Thank you. All right. I think next on the agenda is Nicole Green, Chairman of the Bighorn County Library Board. I don't know if she's online.
She is online. I am going to promote her and her colleague Troy Butler as panelists, and they should be showing up here in just a moment.
There also was a Nicole Green. Is that correct? Oh, I said that already. I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm here.
And we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I was told to just join this meeting because you had questions for us and our accountant is here as well.
I
And
think,
here as well, yes.
go ahead. And I'm not sure if you have comments or not, but yes, you were asked to attend. And the question came to myself from a board member in Bighorn County on the library board that he was not receiving, the audit reports or financial statements. And I think that was the same with the Department of Audit.
He was emailed everything that we emailed to everybody on the board. Our accountant emails us all the financial statements, and of course, you can always go and talk to our accountant to find out more information. This board member has not attended a meeting for more than a year, and he never brought it to my attention.
Okay, how about the concern with the Department of Audit and the reporting to them?
I think I'll have Troy take that one over for you.
Yeah, I'll just give you a little context on that one. I first started helping out the Department of, or the library, sorry, in 2020. That first audit, I also that year started helping another county entity. And at the conclusion of the audit, I got a login for the F-32 reporting for this other entity. And then at the same time, I asked if they have the login information for the library, and I can assume taking over that annual report and filing as well. And they said that due to the nature of the its relationship with the library, they were not required to file that annual report. And I would have thought it was the F-32, but for them, it is the PF-102. And so we did not file that first year. And the fact that we never heard from the Department of Audit or the state kind of confirmed that they were part of the county, which is what we were told, the county reporting and their component unit audit, and then we weren't required to make that, file that report. We have reported, or we have submitted budgets to the county commissioners. We have filed and been part of the component unit audit with the county. The only thing we were not aware of was the need to additionally file the annual report and the PF-102. So we first heard that in February of this year. We've been working with the state audit and have no issues completing that. That'll be done here in the next few weeks for this year, and there's no concern moving forward. That was just a miscommunication of the timing of the audit or of the report, and we will get that taken care of. The other issue with that is just kind of I think maybe the outlier there is the county had historically run the library, and so that's where maybe that confusion happened at some point down the road. We just kind of picked that up in 2020, and we're not aware of the filing requirements there. But now that we are going to file here over these next couple of weeks as we're finalizing the audit.
Thank you for the report. And I don't know if there's any other questions, but it sounds like you have taken care of the issue and that was brought to me. And so I'm glad you're here and thank you. Do you have any other comments? Oh, we have Representative Williams wants to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for Mr. Butler. Given your experience and what you've reported, was there any opportunity for Department of Audit to better serve you in regards to communication or service?
Mr. Butler.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think the only, maybe that would be recommendation. I don't know. I think looking back, I probably should have reached out to the state as well, just to confirm, because that was an oddity on my front. I've never seen that, but I didn't, because we did not hear back from the state, we assumed that that was a non-issue. That maybe if there's a circumstance where if an entity is not making that filing requirement, meeting that filing requirement, a notice of some sort would have been helpful at any point during that period. If we would have received a notice of, hey, that report was due, we would have filed it right immediately. So there was no concern on our end of, we could have filed that at any point had we known the entity was required to file it and it wasn't part of the component audit with Bighorn County. That would be the only thing that would have been helpful on our end, is to be notified sooner.
Nope. Any other questions? Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you.
at this point, we'll take public comment. I think the first one maybe for public comment maybe is from the Department of Audit. We may be a little ahead of schedule, but I think this is a proper time.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Justin Chavis, Director of the Department of Audit. I have with me our Public Funds Administrator, Rich Cummings. Our Public Funds Division is the division that works with government entities. So I don't know what direction you'd like me to take. There's lots of questions, I think, over this morning that kind of pertain to what we do. I kind of put down a list. I can go through and kind of answer the questions I can. How would you like me to proceed?
I think that'd be great if you could do that, if you could answer some of the questions, and hopefully you wrote them down better than I did.
All right, I got some chicken scratch here, so I'll answer what I can, and then if you have more questions. I just one of the things I noted was timeframes, the discussion of when things are due, and that Wyoming is maybe a little more aggressive. So I wanted to clarify there, like for example, Colorado, all of their entities by statute are required to have an audit unless they have an exemption from the state auditor. It's the audits that are due 6 months after the end of the fiscal year. In Wyoming, that's our same time frame. If you have to have an audit, that audit is due 6 months after the end of the fiscal year. What's due September 30th is basic financial information that's unaudited, that doesn't require all the audit stuff. Now, the reason that's required is because our department is statutorily required to produce the cost to government report by December 31st. So if we're not getting financial information until December 31st, we can't produce that report on December 31st. That's why it's due September 30th, so that we have time to review it, compile it, and get it ready for that report. If you move that date for when information is due to the end of the year, which is totally under your purview, we would ask that you move the date for when we have to produce that report to give us time to compile that information. So just some other considerations. If we eliminate, say, the F-66 for any entity that has to submit an audit, the F-66 is electronic. We can pull that information electronically. If we're then having to pull that information from audit reports, we're going to have to physically pull that out of audit reports and compile it. So that will extend our time frame for putting that information together. But I just wanted to be clear that for audits, we have a similar time frame as many other states of six months after the end of the year.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on that. Getting into the concept of accrual accounting, GAAP accounting, and looking at your audit timelines, typically with accrual, you have a reconciliation period that you have to work with so that you can actually fix and look at your cash transactions as well as your your billing, your revenue streams and your expenditure streams, and work through all of that oftentimes after the fact. What do you use for a reconciliation period? How much time do we have to have as a buffer in addition to when you would close the window so that the reconciliation can take place before you can even look at the records to audit those and have them accurately represented on an accrual basis instead of a cash basis?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I'd say in part that's going to depend on the entity and the complexity of the entity and what kind of adjustments they're making. I think, that could be a month, 2 months, depending on available staff, complexity of year-end adjustments that you're making.
Mr. Chavez, so the F-66 is the report. Is that correct? And the audit is separate?
Mr. Chairman, yes. So
Needed.
the F-66 is the report of revenues, expenditures, cash and investments that the county treasurers and county clerks have to fill out and submit to us. That's different than their audit. That information isn't audited information. It's simply reporting financial information. The audit would actually be diving into that information. Is it properly reported? Is it accurate? Does it comply with GAAP? That's all much more involved process that would then be, that audit would be due by the end of the calendar year.
So the F-66 is not really GAAP? I guess I don't understand maybe the terminology, and can you explain that to all of us?
Mr. Chairman, so the F-66 can be on an accrual basis or a cash basis. Historically, it kind of depends on the entity and the entity type that's reporting. But some of them we get cash, some of them we get accrual.
I don't know how to ask this. So is it your opinion they could fill that out without having gone with an auditor?
Mr. Chairman, I think it depends on the staff they have available and whether or not their staff can do GAAP accounting.
But maybe I did hear you say that it could be cash.
Mr. Chairman,
To
yeah,
show that.
they can report based on a cash basis, yes.
Okay. Any other questions on just this topic Senator Ide?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chavez, Director. So we see this 9 consecutive years of failed audits. I guess first, is that accurate? And how many do you let go? I mean, do you go to 10? Do you go to 20? Do you go to 50? Do other local municipalities have the same issues year after year after year? Could you kind of bring it into layman's terms, help me understand 9 consecutive audits and why we should expect more or less from Johnson County? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ide. So I would say it's accurate to say there have been findings in 9 consecutive audits. I would agree with previous testimony that that's not necessarily a failed audit. Most audits aren't done on a pass-fail basis. A finding doesn't necessarily mean you've failed an audit. Some audits are done on a pass-fail. So if you're subject to, say, IRS standards, they will come in and they will do a security audit that is pass-fail. They'll give you a pass-fail. In general, financial audits aren't on a pass-fail basis. But if you want to think of them in that term, if you have an unqualified or an unmodified opinion, that would be a passed audit. A failed audit would be a disclaimer of opinion. That would say things are so bad we can't make a determination as to whether or not your financial information is accurate or reliable. So I'd say it's accurate to say they had findings in 9 consecutive years. I would say there are other entities, I'd say, that have issues year after year. I'd say in recent years, we're seeing, I don't know if explosion is the right, but definitely an uptick in issues related to accounting issues. So it's not exclusive to Johnson County. I think the difficulty is, what is the resolution, I think, for municipal fiscal procedures requirements. Essentially, you have to knowingly and willingly violate the act before something can potentially happen. And then that's going to be in the hands of the AG's office. And then I think not all findings are created equal, right? So it's kind of like crimes. Some crimes are much worse than others. It's the same way with findings. Some are much more concerning than others. And so how you address that might be different depending on the finding.
Just for everybody's knowledge, I am going to quit at noon so we can go eat lunch, and we'll plan on being back at 1. So that's the plan. Are there more questions on the topic we're talking about right now?
Just
Representative.
one.
Okay, let's go with Senator McEwen. Sorry, I missed your hand.
Oh, no worries. We understand that GAAP stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles. That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, yes, that's what GAP stands for.
Great. Why aren't we following it?
Thank you. Do you want to comment on that?
Say, Mr. Chairman, like that's a question for the individual entities. But ultimately, most of the audit reports end up materially accurate in compliance with GAAP. The question is, who is getting us from cash to that GAAP basis? That's what's causing the issue, like with Johnson County, is they don't have staff that can identify that. The auditors are. So if the auditor identifies it, that's automatically a finding. So if they were to say contract with a different CPA firm to make their year-end adjustments, that CPA would make the exact same adjustments that their auditor is making. It's just that there would be no finding then at that point because it's not the auditors making that adjustment. If the auditors have to do it, it's automatically a finding.
Follow up.
Oh, follow up.
So money comes in, money goes out. We have to track it, right? It's my question.
So, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, Senator McEwen, yes.
Mr. Chavez, okay. Okay. Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Well, I have a question in a moment, but just to clarify, on accrual, it's not money coming in and money going out. It's obligations coming in and obligations going out. So that's the entire difference. It's, are you accounting for the dollars showing up and leaving, or are you accounting for the obligations for those dollars coming in or leaving? That's it. That's the entirety of it. That's the secret answer. So
The secret answer?
the secret answer, yep, Mr. Chairman. But getting to my question,
Yes.
you mentioned that if it's done through 2 steps, so that we have a CPA do the work and then it goes to the auditor and there's no finding. But if instead it goes directly to the auditor and there is a finding, but it ends up the same way, is there anything that you can think of that's detrimental to the public in any way, or to transparency, or to best practices by doing it in 1 step instead of 2 steps, where we know that 2 steps costs significantly more? So I see a harm to the public for taking the 2nd step just on the fact that I have to pay someone for the 2nd step. But am I missing something on the other side? Are we doing a disservice to the public by going 1 step instead of 2?
Mr. Chavez.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, so I'd say you end up in the same place. As an auditor, the concern would be if it's an entity that's not required to be audited. So for example, city or towns under 4,000 don't have to be audited. They're also not subject to GAAP. But if they were to report GAAP-based financials and they're not audited, then you don't know. But essentially, in this case, we're ending up in the same place. Now, if your findings are not related simply to the conversion from your cash to your GAAP, then there's more concern there. But in this case, we're ending up at the same place.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
quick
Rothfuss.
follow-up on that. So what I took away from that is if they are required to present GAAP financials and that requirement's there, then it really does end up in the same place and everything is equal. If they're not required, then realistically, everything's equal also because they're not required. Is that fair?
Mr. Chavez.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I'd say like the first case is, in this particular case, yes, it depends on what those audit issues are. But in this case, in talking to the CPA, it's literally just making that conversion is what's generating those material audit adjustments. If it's something else, then there might be other concerns.
I see. Thank you for your help. Appreciate it.
And then just if I can,
Yes.
with Senator McEwen's question about cash versus GAAP, we talked to Senator Rothfuss said cash is when it actually comes in or leaves. That's when you record it versus GAAP or accrual is an obligation. So I'll give you an example. It actually happened in Johnson County. The numbers probably aren't the real numbers, but I'll give you a scenario that kind of illustrates the difference. So Johnson County, they have some land that they lease to Game and Fish. 10 years, $1 million a year. So the lease is $10 million. 3 years in, so I'll say the first 2 years, Game and Fish makes their $1 million payment. That's what gets recorded. Year 4, Game and Fish pays the balance of that lease. So they pay $6 million in that year. Under cash basis, you're going to report that you received $6 million. Under GAAP basis, you're going to report that you received $1 million because $1 million relates to that year. And then each of the 5 subsequent years, you're going to report $1 million in revenue. So the difference between cash and GAAP is when do you record that transaction?
Thank you.
Can I follow up?
When you're recognized. Yes, Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the government gets to decline these millions of dollars over years, but none of us else get to. And we call that cash basis versus GAAP. And I'll quit on this, Mr. Chairman, but I'm telling you, it's garbage.
Thank you. Mr. Chavez, do you have any comments?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's a question there.
No, I didn't hear one. Representative Lean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today. My question has to do with Star Valley. I asked earlier, could you kind of give us a rundown on what the smaller municipalities look like around the state and how some of them are able to accomplish being in compliance, but then we have others that are not, that are a bigger entity?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Lean, I'd first ask when you're talking Star Valley, what entity are we talking? Are we talking Lincoln County? Are we talking, say, town of Afton?
Representative Lean.
Forgive me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me while I flip back to some notes.
Yes, if I can interrupt, sir, there's several municipalities in Star Valley. So which one are you talking about?
We're getting there.
Looking through my notes, I'm looking at Lincoln County as a whole.
Lincoln County as a whole.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Lean. So I think, again, it's really going to depend on, what workforce is available there and what's the complexity of what they're doing, because that matters as well in terms of knowledge required to present your financial statements in accordance with GAAP. So without knowing specifics of Lincoln County's situation, I can't speak to that, but I can say that just in general, we are seeing more, regardless of the size of the entity, more accounting issues in recent years.
Representative Williams, and this is the last question, and we're going to lunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go back a little bit. I've had my hand up for a while, so I'm sorry that I'm taking you back a little further to your earlier testimony, Mr. Chavez. But first, thank you for providing the clarification on findings and the fact that financial audits are not essentially a pass or fail, are on a pass or fail basis. So we heard earlier that from Johnson County that the allegation of 9 years of failed audits was hogwash. You talked about findings in these audits. So my question to you, Mr. Chavez, is do findings in multiple consecutive audits increase the risk of fraud?
Mr. Chavez.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, I think it depends on what the finding is.
Follow up?
Thank you. So in the case of the 9 audits, which you're deeming as not a pass or fail situation, and your knowledge of those 9, do you deem these findings in them as increasing the risk of fraud?
Mr. Chavez.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Williams, the main ones in terms of not having someone on staff with gap knowledge and therefore the material audit adjustments to get to gap, I would say no, that's not really a big risk of fraud.
Follow up, or are you good? We're good. I think we're going to shut down and go to lunch. We'll be back. I don't know if we can get back by 1. Let's go 1:15. And hopefully you'll stick around and we'll keep working with you. Thank you.
A few more questions. I know.